a very good morning, ladies and gentlemen, all of you who are here. Most hearty welcome from me in this today sunny, chilly, slightly chilly for us, bright Calcutta. This is the 15th Environmental Partnership Summit and Environmental Excellence Award, which is a yearly offering. It's a yearly offering by the Indian Chamber to people of the country and some including people outside the country as well. So now why we are having this conference at a time when we have the just COP26 just finished in November in Glasgow. So what in that COP26, India's ambitious targets, many of them came through at that time. By 2030, decarbonization by cutting India's projected carbon emission by 1 billion ton, raise renewable energy, including everything, to about 500 gigawatt. Half of that will be solar. In solar, we have done pretty well. India has done pretty well. We have 100 gigawatt, I think, end of 21, end of 22. I believe it should go up to 175. And so that means it's possible to do that. And also, the final announcement by the Prime Minister that India will have a net zero emission by 2070. What is happening all over the world, all over the country, all of you keep track of it. But in solar particularly, and also in wind partially, India has been doing quite well. I think the largest solar plant in the world is under commissioning in Rajasthan. But apart from that, the other peripherals which are required, particularly the transmission lines, renewable energy generation is one thing, but renewable energy transmission is another thing, and it needs infrastructure for that. You must have seen also in the papers very recently that the government is spending quite a few $1 billion for a transmission line link to connect the 7 states only to carry 20 gigawatt of renewable energy. And before that, we have 2 very large links from south to north and north to northeast, very 2 large already installed, which can take, in spite of its variability, in spite of their variability of renewable energy, it can take these lines. So technology has come and technology will stay. India has also seen one thing, as you can see, that the government of India and 2 largest private companies in this country, or one of them maybe one of the largest in the whole world, they have promised that they will go to the working towards of green hydrogen. And they have also promised that they will try to make India the hydrogen hub for the world, to export green hydrogen cheapest cost, at cheapest cost. That was also part of the promise to rest of the world. So India has also subscribed to ISA, one of the founders, you can say, one sun, one world, one green. It seems difficult, but definitely achievable. If we look at it requires a lot of technology. If I come to governance, and it requires a lot of technology. Energy is absolutely, totally, utterly connected with this transition and with environment. A lot of disruptions in energy are already there, more are on the way. Technology will ensure consumers' right and desire for coverage, accessibility, low cost, open access, no bilateral trading. PPAs will gradually probably go, already it has gone for the coal-fired power station, on the spot real-time market, and finally only green exchanges. New technologies of wireless transmission will come in maybe in 5 to 10 years. Already the pilot is highly successful in New Zealand. You must have seen that. Real-time solar, gross net metering, and new storage technologies. As an electrical engineer, I feel sometimes a little bad that we have not advanced as much as you should have in storage of electricity. But a lot has come and more will come. More and more decentralization will also be there in the power circuit. Electric mobility will be a game changer. Transcontinental power lines are also being thought of. You see, the sun is shining, the wind is blowing somewhere in the world, all the 24 hours in a day. So why not take advantage of that? To connect is the key word, and the international, intercontinental, transnational power lines which are planned look towards that for it. So we have to find solution of all problems, unknown unknowns, known unknowns, and known knowns. So what is the opinion of people of COP26? Well, we have heard the young lady, 18 years old Swedish lady, girl who has come into prominence now, Greta Thunberg, actually, if you pronounce it in Swedish. She has said that climate talks in Glasgow is a total failure. We cannot solve a problem by the same methods that got us into this problem in the first place. The climate scientist, another climate scientist, Dr. Michael Mann, has said, who has attended all the conferences, I think, he said it's activists. They want to undermine and discredit the very notion of multilateral climate order. And this multilateral climate action is all COP26 are nothing but all for that. The Ugandan activist Nakate has said that the world is greening again. Nature has been restored. Another world is necessary. Another world is possible. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has said that let's be clear, there is a serious risk that Glasgow will not deliver. So there has been arguments, there have been agreements, there has been passion, there has been commitment. We have seen very VVIPs breaking down in the conference, some embracing in getting what has been received. The problem of money in doing all this has already been talked about. Many people are saying, show me the money. EU has said in Copenhagen, which is 10 years or 12 years earlier where I was there, and it was said that there should be $100 billion for the developing country. Hopefully after this conference, that will be renewed. The whole point now is that the governance is not technology. I'm sure technology will come, but we have to manage that right. That is the main thing. In fact, the whole point is also that we must ask ourselves, what do we want? What do we want to do? High-speed growth or high-quality development? It is a key lesson that we have learned, that unless we give importance to resilience in our governance, actually it is no point in making something, because all of them might get destroyed one day. So that's why people say that if you want to go fast, do it alone. If you want to go far, do it together. The era of the so-called brown resource-heavy growth is going, almost gone, just like the hammer in an auction. Growth will be decoupled from resource consumption and also pollutant generation. So increasing production will no longer be an excuse at all for allowing more pollution or using more and more of the raw material. One, we must be sure of that. We in the industry must be sure of that for the future. Business as usual will not remain as an option. Private, public sectors have to invest in initiatives that are greener, healthier, fairer to the planet and its people. We owe it to the next generation that a fighting chance, at least, to build a world in which growth will be automatically, assuredly green, and that will be the new normal norm. It is not an alliteration only. It's a true thing, at least I believe in. And the color of money and growth, both will be green. Lord Tennyson has said that the old order changeth and the new order cometh. I think the millennials are showing our path and accepting it for governance in the future years. And the new order will bring us all that is clean and all that is resilient. So what is needed, I think, everybody's business in corporation, public and private, will have to have a heart full of ethics knowledge about ethics, ethical heart, a social heart, an ecological heart, but possibly a business brain. Thank you very much for your patience, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, sir. We now move on, and may I request Dr. Bibha Dhawan, Director General of TERI, to please address us.
Thank you so much, and thanks, Mr. Mukherjee, for your excellent welcome and setting the tone for today's discussions. Well, as you rightly mentioned, and we all are talking about, climate change is an environmental challenge confronting all countries across the globe in varying degrees of intensities. Of course, it is also documented that the have-nots, or the countries which already have less of resources, perhaps are going to be most impacted due to the changing climate. Let's look across Africa, Asia, and I'll say North and South America and Europe as well. The adverse effects of climate change have manifested over the years as ozone layer depletion, continental global warming, shower of acid rains, extended fires, melting ice, rise in sea levels, and other extreme events, which calls for an urgent actions at national and international levels. Last year, of course, we have all witnessed, whether it is fires, whether it is floods in Germany and New York, or cloud busting in Uttarakhand, which earlier were exceptions, but they are becoming more like norm, that it has happened again. That's what we take it. So I'll say well, one doesn't look at opportunities from calamities. But one thing is that 2 decades before, we had to tell people that climate change will become a challenge. But today it is, everyone says, and even for events which you don't ascribe to climate change, and they'll say it's happening because of the changing climate. So today, every stakeholder, all the citizens on this planet, they are aware of the challenge, and therefore one does expect that they will be more than open towards change, so as that climate change can be delayed. I won't say it can be stopped. It is that how much we can progress, we have to grow, but at the same time that we have to take care of the climate. And we discussed about Glasgow. Yes, it's over several decades that governments are collectively meeting and pledging to slow down the climate change impacts at global levels. And it is assumed that despite intensified diplomacy, the world could soon face devastating consequences of climate change. And at the same time, I won't say it is only governments or what we discuss at COP meetings. It is far beyond that, that each, whether it is industry, whether it is each one of us, we have to own certain responsibility and ensure that the commitments which are made at the COP meeting, they get translated into action, and it's not just remains a talk show kind of a thing. We are still witnessing that the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere that is rising and ultimately heating the earth at an alarming rate. And scientists, they warn that if this warming continues, it could bring environmental catastrophe to much of the world, including staggering sea level rise, record-breaking droughts, floods, and widespread loss of biodiversity. There have been many instances where developing countries argue that developed countries have emitted more greenhouse gases over time. They say that these developed countries should now carry more of the burden because they were able to grow their economies without restraint. Indeed, the United States has emitted most of all time, followed by European Union. However, China and India are now among the world's top annual emitters, along with the United States. Similarly, developed countries have argued that those countries must do more now to address climate change. And this entire debate at COP26 about phase down and phase out of coal, we all have witnessed that. Now, let's look at the important international agreements on climate change. The major climate agreements have evolved to pursue emissions reduction. The most important ones being Montreal Protocol, which was signed in 1987. And the protocol has succeeded in eliminating nearly 99% of the ozone depleting substances. UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, 1992. It was the first global treaty to address climate change, and it established an annual forum known as Conference of Parties, or COP, for international discussions aimed at stabilizing the concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. And as I said earlier, like, it is more of that commitments are made by the global leaders. So that shows the way to the world thereafter to act upon. So it's not action oriented, it is more that commitments and a willingness of various countries towards combating climate change, or so that is there. Kyoto Protocol 2005, adapted in 1997 and entered into force in 2005, was the first legally binding climate treaty. It required developed countries to reduce emissions by an average of 5% below 1990 levels, and for establishing systems to monitor countries' progress. Paris Agreement 2015, the most significant global climate agreement to date, the Paris Agreement requires all countries to set emissions reduction pledges. Governments set targets known as nationally determined contributions, or NDCs, with the goals of preventing the global average temperature from rising 2 degrees centigrade above the pre-industrial levels and pursuing efforts to keep it below 1.5. It also aims to reach global net zero emissions, where the amount of greenhouse gases emitted equals the amount removed from the atmosphere in the second half of the century. Through the Kyoto Protocol and the Paris Agreement, countries agreed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The Kyoto Protocol required only developed countries to reduce emissions, while the Paris Agreement recognized that climate change is a shared problem and called on all countries to set emissions targets. Dozens of countries made new commitments during the UN climate conference known as COP26 in November 2021 at Glasgow. Every 5 years, countries are supposed to assess their progress towards implementing the agreement through a process known as global stock take, and the first of this is planned in 2023. In the similar lines, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC, a UN body established in 1988, regularly assess the latest climate science and produce consensus-based reports for countries. According to IPCC, global emissions must halve by 2030 and reach net zero by 2050. Given the enormous inequity in emissions in the world, the Organization for Organic Cooperation and Development, OECD, countries must then reach net zero by 2030, China by 2040, and India and rest of the world by 2050. At the 26th Conference of Parties, India declared a 5-fold strategy to achieve this feat. These 5 points include: India will get its non-fossil energy capacity to 500 gigawatt by 2030. India will meet 50% of its energy requirements from renewable energy by 2030. India will reduce the total projected carbon emissions by 1 billion tons from now onwards till 2030. And I'll say it's a huge, huge target and commitment on behalf of Government of India, because we still haven't peaked in terms of our energy requirements. And it's also that by 2030, India will reduce the carbon intensity of its economy by less than 45%. And by 2070, India will achieve the target of net zero. India's most recent stimulus is more climate friendly, with 2/3 of the resources targeted towards a green recovery, including roughly $3 billion in battery development and solar PV. While the additional stimulus is a positive step, India continues to support coal with fresh loans to a number of thermal power points, undermining a green recovery. India has accepted a massive transformation of our energy systems, which will be designed for the future and compliant with the new climate change goals. However, it is ironical that climate change funding remains non-transparent and without verification. Now, if we really want to look at the other stakeholders which can contribute greatly towards the green economy development, I'll say CSR can play a very important role. It can be an effective tool for mitigating climate change. It is the duty of corporations to redress climate change through environment-friendly manufacturing techniques, adoption of green transparent policy and environmental disclosures. An attempt to refocus CSR as a migrant tool for climate change has led to postulation of the green theory. Green thinking raises an alarm on the side effects of economic growth on climate change. It's a novel thinking, which articulates the concerns for people's right, justice, citizenship, good governance, and most importantly, the environment. In a sequel to the emergence of green theory, there are other things which has to go side and side, such as green marketing, green products, green policies, green consumerism, which have emerged to convey green lifestyles, as well as warning corporations against remaining unresponsive to climate change and environmental degradation, which has precipitated prices across the globe. Similarly, environmentalists and ecologists have advocated green thinking for industrialists and manufacturing companies to be accommodated in the process of production so as to have sustainable positive impact on the consumer and the environment in the long run. Now, being in TERI, what we are also witnessing is the willingness on part of the corporations. In fact, many of them, they are coming forward and they are seeking help in developing methodologies so that they can be much greener, or the paths which they follow. And they are basically looking at the entire LCA. It is not just their product. They are also looking into how the raw material which they are using has been manufactured. So that gives a lot of confidence. And the important part is it is not just restricted to large corporates, which are very conscious in building their image. It is also with the small manufacturers, because I'll say that there is a general realization that we have only one planet to live. And if we really want to live on this planet, more than money, what is important is that it is livable for our next generation. So that is what is the general feeling among the most manufacturers. Now, if we look at the global green policy to manage climate change, the 7th, 8th, and 9th principle in the UN Global Compact needs to be enforced. So, as a special initiative of the UN Secretary General, the United Nations Global Compact is a call to companies everywhere to align their operation and strategies with 10 principles in the area of human rights, labor, environment, and anti-corruption. The 7th principle made it mandatory for all corporations across the globe to adopt a precautionary approach to environmental management. The 8th principle requires corporations to promote greater environmental responsibility, and 9th principle expects to deploy environment-friendly technologies in their operations. The Sustainable Development Goal, SDG Goal 13, and its underlying targets on climate change further calls for global collaboration and local action to resolve the climate issue. A green policy directed at climate change is a self-regulating action designed by political actors to mitigate the threat that climate change poses to the world. Furthermore, the developed economies have developed an environmental reporting standard called the Green Reporting Index as social and environmental indicators for mining corporations, green compliance, and responsiveness to environmental issues. And through the 15th Environment Partnership Summit and Environment Excellence Award, ICC is undertaking promotion of the relevance of green economy and other associated mitigation strategies to combat the issue of climate change. It highlights the increasing awareness amongst the government and corporate sector towards the issue of climate change and mandating the inclusion of concepts to devise solutions in the current and future times. It signifies their role in supporting clear and consistent policies and robust monitoring, reporting, and verification, and believing such actions will stimulate innovation and collaborative solutions. I wish success to ICC and all participating stakeholders for the event. Best of luck. Have very fruitful discussions. Stay safe, stay blessed. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for your kind words and for the detailed overview. We would now move on and request Dr. Kalyan Rudro, Chairman of West Bengal Pollution Control Board, to give his perspective. Over to you, sir.
Good morning and Happy New Year. It is really a privilege for me to interact with you. As Pollution Control Board is largely a regulator. As a regulator, what we expect from the industry houses or this kind of organization, we have 4 areas of concern. One is definitely the emission control, the emission coming out from the factories. Second is the liquid as well as the solid waste you generate in your premises. What we expect is that 100% recycling as desired by the Honorable NGT. I also understand it is very difficult to achieve. And apart from these 3 areas, I personally have another issue which is not directly in the domain of the Pollution Control Board, that is the biodiversity loss, which we are recording at an alarming rate since mid-1960s. My friend, Mr. Mukherjee, and also Madam has spoken elaborately about the climate change issue. In West Bengal possibly is the only state which touches both Himalaya in the north and Bay of Bengal in the south. And Satyajit Ray once wrote, this is an accident of geography. As Pollution Control Board, we are concerned about the air quality. And air quality has a direct linkage with the climate change. And earlier we had about 14 continuous monitoring stations, 79 manual stations. But recently we have decided to install 150 air quality monitoring network, largely sensor-based network, and 70 such are already in place. Probably this will be the most intensive monitoring network in the country. We have already touched from Kalimpong, Kujbihar down to Sundarban. And we have a app, what we call Poribesh. If you just download it in your smartphone, you can see the air quality of the any stations which we are recording so far. In West Bengal, 7 cities have been declared as non-attainment cities. Out of about 132 so far in the country, we have, these are Kolkata, Howrah, Barakpur, Haldia, Raniganj, Durgapur, and Asansol. Meaning that in these 7 non-attainment cities or towns, the air quality, particularly during the winter months, that is starting from mid-October, to be more precise, mid-October down to about early March, the air quality is not fit for breathing. Not that all 12 parameters pollutant we are monitoring, they are above the threshold limit. We have 2 major challenges. One is PM 2.5 and other is PM 10. And these 2 pollutant goes above the threshold limit since mid-October, when the temperature falls and the inversion layer comes down closer to the surface. From about late March, when temperature increases, the air quality starts to improve, and the rainy season is the most comfortable season for us. When I was a young man, I liked winter in Kolkata. But since I joined Pollution Control Board, I really want the winter to go away because air quality is always an alarming situation in this city. By academic training, I am a river scientist. I was also looking at the century scale database, what we have received from the IMD. It is not that temperature is increasing only, but the rainfall pattern in Bengal is also changing. We have recorded a tendency of short duration intense rainfall in Bengal, resulting more flood and more water short condition. There is a short duration intense rainfall. Say this year we recorded more than 400 millimeter rainfall in Asansol, which is historically we have never recorded. The lower Damodar area experiencing recurrent floods. Bengal has several advantages, several disadvantages too. Being located at the tail end of the Indo-Gangetic plain, we receive pollutant from the upper Gangetic plain too. We have signed a MOU or collaboration with the IIT Delhi, and the preliminary report which is submitted by the IIT Delhi, it says that 53% of the pollutant in Bengal is coming from outside. Fortunately, we have complete reversal of wind direction during summer and winter. That is, during the summer, we get airflow from southwest, from Bay of Bengal. And during the winter, we get northerly wind from Indo-Gangetic plain. And 21% of the pollutant, believe me, as IIT says, it is coming from Bangladesh too. As I was looking at the database, it is largely the dust not the serious pollutant which can cause serious harm to your health, but it is largely the dust. We produce 1, 2, 3, 4 crops and keeping the topsoil loose for the entire year. So whenever wind blows, it carries the dust from Jharkhand, Bihar, UP, and even from Assam and also Bangladesh. So what we can't do is we can't alter the nature. We can't change the rainfall pattern. We can't change the seasonal cycle. We can't reverse the wind direction. We'll have to live with this. When there was complete lockdown in West Bengal, I observed that we have recorded 47% reduction of the PM 2.5. That means 53% of the PM 2.5 is something which nature generates. So we have several serious challenges, as Mr. Mukherjee and Madam was saying about the climate change. I was monitoring the sea level change in Bengal Delta, that is the Bay of Bengal. And Madam, you rightly referred to the IPCC last report, which probably published in 2019. They have said that global sea level rise is at the rate of 3.6 millimeter per year. But other studies in the Bengal Delta shows the Bay of Bengal is rising at the rate of about 4 millimeter per year. In addition, which we have another serious problem, which we normally don't speak. That is, this is a newly built delta where the soil or the sediment load is not yet compacted. So in the active delta of the Sundarban, the land is rising at the subsiding at the rate of 2.9 millimeter per year. So if you club together 4 millimeter rise of the sea level and 2.9 millimeter fall of the land, meaning the total impact will be 6.9 millimeter, about 7 millimeter per year, which is globally the highest. As a river scientist, I was also looking at the century scale change of the shape of the islands of Sundarban. We have so far lost about 230 square kilometers of land from the southern tract of littoral tract of Bengal. And if you look at our counterpart of Bangladesh, Bangladesh receiving the total sediment load of the Ganga, Brahmaputra, Meghna system, and it has gained during the same time about 500 square kilometer land. So this seems to be a paradox of nature. Well, this part of the Bengal is losing its land. Right at this moment, Sagar Island is being reduced at an alarming rate. I have mapped after the devastating cyclone, what we named last Yas. The government of West Bengal constituted a very high power committee, and I was made the chairman of that committee. We submitted an exhaustive report to the government of West Bengal, what we can do to combat this changing climatic situation. You can go to our website, wepcb.gov.in, and you can, it is a downloadable data, publicly accessible data. You can look at that report. We will have to do something, what we have named vegetative shield. That is, you know, in the western part of the Sundarban, since the colonial period, 54 islands were deforested. And this renders the cyclones to attack the coastal tract freely. So we have suggested to create a vegetative shield. Vegetative shield creation of the vegetative wall takes about a decade to grow. In the meantime, we will have to intervene some engineering solution, some kind of offshore intervention, like construction of the barrier reef below the low tide line, or some onshore intervention can save, because about 4.5 million people are living there. So we are living in a time which seems to be the most difficult time. And one pollution control board, one research institute like TERI or CSIR can do nothing. We will have to join hands together. And these industry houses and organizations like ICC has very important role to play. We'll have to work together. We'll have to fight. We are living in a system, ecosystem, where everything is connected to everything else. We are not living in isolation. It reminds me the famous book of Barry Commoner, Making Peace with the Planet, if my memory serves me right. He said the 4 laws of ecology governs our existence. First law, in this ecosystem, everything is connected to everything else. Second law, everything must go somewhere. It is a dynamic system. Third law, whatever you do, it has a cost. And fourth law is very close to my heart. Whenever I had been teaching in the university, I frequently referred to this slide that nature knows the best kind of engineering. And don't try to alter it too much. And Mahatma Gandhi long back in early 1930s and none other than Rabindranath Tagore also emphasized that don't try to, while delivering a lecture by 1924 in China, Rabindranath also said that don't try to alter the nature, try to live with it. And I was also reading the Dialectics of Nature by Frederick Engels. He said that you are a part of the nature. Don't try to overcome being part of it. So we will have to understand this. We will have to join hands together and fight this unprecedented challenge the earth is ever facing. With these few words, I stop. Thank you all for your patient hearing.
Thank you very much, sir, for raising some very, very important points. I'm sure we have taken note of this and we will take it forward, sir. I would request now Mr. Atul Bagai, Head of India Country Office, UNEP, to please deliver his address.
Thank you so much, Ji, and I hope you can all hear me. And I would especially like to thank ICC for giving UNEP this opportunity to talk on a very, very important and topical subject. And as Alok Ji said, it's becoming even more important post Glasgow, where countries need to really look at. I was really very inspired to hear my previous speakers, all 3 of them, who I think have put this whole issue in a very good perspective, especially focusing on our country, India. What I would try to do is very briefly give a global perspective about which Vibhaji talked very succinctly, and also try to highlight some of the areas that would need more attention and more focus in the coming years to meet all the targets that Alok Ji mentioned, that Rudra Sahab also mentioned in the coming years, and then probably talk a little bit about how UNEP, which has recently opened an office in India just about 3.5, 4 years back, what we could do to support the efforts of the Indian stakeholders. I just wanted to start with highlighting what is happening at a global environmental level, where we are getting overtaken by this whole issue of climate change, and as a result of which a lot of other environmental challenges which we are facing and which are very closely linked and interlinked are also now trying to get more attention. And these were mentioned also very by Rudra Sahab. Is the triple planetary crisis of climate change, of nature loss, and of pollution. And I think these are the 3 major challenges which we are facing at a global environmental level. And of course, a lot of this is also because of the increasing demands and unsustainable consumption, about which my previous speakers have also beautifully outlined. And the pandemic that we are facing, the economic crisis and the ecological breakdown, certainly in the coming years, we cannot afford to lose on any of these fronts. We are all nowadays talking about the accumulating pollution from chemicals and waste, from the changing climate, from the biodiversity loss, land degradation, and drought. But we also need to understand that they are all closely related and are reinforcing each other. So action in one area for mitigation certainly would be impacting mitigation in the other areas. If we just take a few statistics, and I'm not trying to paint a picture of gloom, but I think we need to have good solid data for us to come up with good policy interventions. And if you are looking at the global chemical production, which doubled between 2000 and 2017, we also see that a lot of this global chemical production has also shifted from the north to the south, China, India, and some other countries. And it also has brought with it this whole, one of the triple planetary crises of pollution. Marine plastic pollution, which is such an important issue, has increased almost 10-fold since 1980. It is not very surprising, because this statistic is often quoted that more than 90% of world breathe air which does not meet WHO's guidelines. It's amazing, 90%. And of course, by 2025, we know cities will produce 2.2 billion tons of waste, which is 3 times of 2009. And what an exponential growth that is being seen in this area. So we are facing challenges linked to whether air or soil or water or exposure to toxic chemicals. And there is still so much of work done. Coming closer to our own country, India, at a macro level, India's domestic material consumption of primary raw materials has increased by 473% between 1970 and 2015. That is huge. And the kind of impact it would have on environment is enormous. India ranked 94 among 107 countries in the Global Hunger Index, despite the fact that our raw material, our consumption has increased 473%. In fact, over the next 50 years, industries accounting for 80% of our GDP are likely to be most impacted by climate-related losses. And this is a very, not only a staggering statistic, but a very statistic that one can be very fearful of, because if 80% of our GDP is going to get affected by climate changes, we really need to take action at not only an expedited rate, but at such a scaled up level that we are able to address the issues the industry would be facing. There is another very important statistic that India is expected to lose almost 34 million full-time jobs in 2030 as a result of heat stress. We were talking in the beginning about the cold in Delhi and the kind of temperatures that are increasing. But the heat stress is something that is becoming such an important factor and variable in all urban planning and in all agriculture planning. And I think we really need to look at this very, very seriously. And that is the reason some of the cities in India, Ahmedabad being the first, have started building up a heat plan, not a cooling plan, but a heat plan. So I think I'll conclude this part of my intervention by saying that India certainly continues to be vulnerable in terms of dealing with existing impacts of climate change and environmental degradation, along with the need for certainly rapid and equitable economic growth. And this whole debate and narrative on development and environment is really becoming so important and is shaping our international negotiation positions also in the climate change and in the biodiversity related multilateral environmental agreements. Now, how do we move forward? Meaning we need to develop, but we also need to look at the environmental mitigation or sustainable development for the reasons I've quoted above, that we are really degrading our environment and our ecological systems. In fact, there are scientific studies to prove now that the series of zoonotic diseases which have culminated in COVID-19 are also largely what Rudra Sahab said in the last 50, 60 years. The degradation of our ecosystems has led to the present pandemic. So we really need to plan our next 50 years in a more strategic manner and in a manner that we are able to mitigate most of the challenges or degradation that we have done in the last 50 years. And I think nature-based solutions is one big approach that the governments need to look at, India needs to look at, in addition to making this transition just, affordable, and for everyone. And that's a very important driving force for the governments in the world, and certainly for India also. And I'll just give a few examples on what are these nature-based solutions or what impact they can have. Because you'll all agree that natural resources are the backbone of economic development, but they are shrinking, as I mentioned earlier and as the previous speakers have also mentioned. But also the upsurge in economic growth and the consumerism and globalization has driven demand for natural resources, thus even exerting pressures on the environment. Businesses today depend on nature rather directly or through their supply chains, and that over half of global GDP is dependent on nature and its services for the people. In fact, the World Economic Forum in their report 2020 came out with these startling statistics. So if we are going to transform to what we are calling a green economy or a greener economy, what impact could it have? And it could generate almost 15 to 60 million jobs globally over the next 2 decades. And in India itself, shifting to green economy could add 3 million jobs in, for example, in renewable sector, about which Alokji so beautifully mentioned right in the beginning, that the kind of targets we have kept for 450 gigawatts by 2030, a switch to 450 gigawatts could bring in almost 3 million jobs in this sector by 2030. One important aspect, and Alokji also mentioned about this whole 100 billion on the table kind of a discussion and negotiations that are going on. And it's a pity that not even 10 to 15% of that 100 billion is on the table now for mitigating climate change. But this whole financial aspect, or what we are calling now the augmenting financing for sustainable development, that's a very important challenge which everyone is facing, all developing countries are facing. And by 2050, if we're talking of the triple planetary crisis, if they need to be tackled effectively, we need a total investment of almost $8.1 trillion US. So where does this money come from? If we have not been able to bring 100 billion on the table every year, where is this $8.1 trillion going to come? Which means also almost $133 billion annually. And I think the governments really need to look at this challenge very, very closely, the developed countries and the developing countries. And this is also becoming a big issue in discussions. And India is going to assume the G20 presidency in 2023. And I think this is going to be one of the big agenda items for that. I'll want to conclude now by just highlighting in a few points what UN Environment Program is trying to do in India. And we are working closely with the governments, with the industry. I'm very happy that ICC has invited us. We have been closely working with CII and FICCI and ASSOCHAM in Delhi. And we look forward to really collaborating closely with ICC in the coming years on developing mainstream solutions for not only management of chemicals and waste, but also on extraction, on various other manufacturing capabilities which India has. We are also working closely with industry on controlling plastic pollution and its impact on marine ecosystems. And we are trying to bring in some scientific assessments for the Gangetic Basin, which would certainly be a very useful input for the industries along the river Ganga from Uttarakhand to West Bengal. I'll conclude by just highlighting 2 or 3 things of what we all can do. What can ICC, what as an individual, what are those areas where we can actually help? Because we normally tend to see that, oh, it's a problem that the government should tackle. And we tend to look at the government to come up with solutions, to come up with policies. But I think this is something that each and every individual has to understand, that they need to also do something about it and not just sit back and through our consumption patterns add to the problem, but we need to do some action at our levels also. And that's where the need of the hour is, for action by the whole society and to take responsibility. That is one. Several Indian industries have already taken actions and set science-based climate commitments. And this is very important. Even in India, we have many industries that have already taken over science-based climate commitments. And we really need to scale this up to each and every industry, not only the big industry, but more importantly, the SMEs, which need to also look at this from an environmental perspective. 57 Indian companies, as I said, have already committed to more than 95 emission reduction targets. 400 Indian companies are signatories to the UN Global Compact, which is a very important step which have taken. But we really need to scale this up, and I think ICC can play a real big role in this. So finally, in conclusion, there's a lot to do. Everyone has a role to play. Collective action at all levels is the need of the hour. We need to be mindful of our actions and the choices that we make in terms of our living and lifestyles. And that is an important message I wanted to give. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for your very important insights. We will definitely see how we can dovetail our efforts along with UNEP to take this forward. Moving on, may I request Dr. A.R. Khan, Chief General Manager, NABARD of Kolkata Regional Office, to please deliver his address.
Good morning to everyone. Am I audible?
Yes, please.
Yeah, good morning to everyone. It's always a pleasure to be with such eminent people on the ICC platform. And I must thank the ICC to invite me for this kind of interaction with all of you. Very quickly, many of the global perspectives have already been presented by our earlier speakers, so I'll not go into the details. You know, the global temperature, which the reports say that it has gone by 1 degree Celsius over pre-industrial era. This has been very established fact that this has not been only because of the natural variations. So human activities have contributed immensely to this. And there has been a well-established fact that the emission reduction is the way forward to tackle many of these issues which are related to climate change. If I look at the recent assessment report of the 6th IPCC, which was released in 2021, which has given a very clear-cut warning that if this goes unabated, perhaps the huge catastrophe situation the globe will be facing. Another important observation is that as per the Global Climate Risk Index, India ranks 7th in the most vulnerable countries in the world from the climate change point of view. We have a very unique position so far as our country is concerned, because our 20% of the global population lives in India. We have only 4% of the water resources, the global water resources that we have. The country has a very long coastline of more than 7,500 kilometers, more than 80%, 86% of our agri forms. They are basically small and marginal, which are very, very fragmented. These are some of the areas where the country, the whole country is put to a lot of vulnerable position. So the India has a unique position that unless we address these issues through different actions, there would be security, the food security issues, there will be the livelihood issues, particularly in the rural areas, and which are most connected to the agriculture sector. Our 52% of the agriculture is still under rain-fed condition, and which produces almost 40% of the food grains. So this is another area that any climate change impact in terms of the water availability, in terms of the drought situations, will directly give a big hit to the food security of the nation, and indirectly it will affect the millions and millions of rural livelihoods in the region. So these are the areas where we have to focus more. Some of these studies show that the yield of the major crops could decline by almost 25% because of this rising impact of the climate change. Our 109 districts out of 573 rural districts, they have been categorized as a very high risk category from the climate point of view. Almost 201 districts, they have been categorized as a high risk. So in effect, more than 300 districts of the country, they are falling under the high risk or to very high risk category. And that's a very, very alarming situation for the country like India. Our previous speakers have already mentioned some of the constraints that you have to address these climate change issues. Perhaps there are three things which are very, very important. The first thing is of course, availability of the resources. It requires a huge financial resources to address these issues. The second is the technology which we need. And in the Paris Agreement, there was a understanding that the developed economies will share their technologies with the developing economies. Somehow, the pace has been very slow. So the technology availability is another important area which we have to address on a priority basis. And third thing, that what the climate change means to a common man, those who are living in the rural areas, what does it mean to them? So can we have an inclusive program for awareness building across the society, that it is not only the agenda of the government or agenda of the rich and poor, but it is the agenda of every individual. So a large scale of capacity building or the awareness creation is important. These are the three areas which are very, very crucial. And I'm happy to mention that the government of India has been very proactive in announcing and rather implementing many of the important missions, be it a water mission, be it a horticulture mission, Himalayan ecosystem, and the Nimami Gange, etc. Large scale resource allocations have been made to these sectors, basically to address some of these issues which are confronting at the rural level, at the village level, which, like, for example, the water pollution, for example, the drought situations, for example, shifting the agriculture hotspots, the wet pattern, the rainfall pattern, the climate variability at local level and at regional level. So these are some of the areas where the government is trying to address. Insofar as NABARD is concerned, NABARD, right from the beginning, we had a natural resource management center, and many of the funding programs and the projects have been subjected to the scrutiny from the climate point of view and from the environmental and sustainability point of view. In 2012, NABARD has been accredited as a national implementing entity by the Adaptation Fund, which is headquartered in United States. In 2015, again, NABARD was accredited as a direct access entity by the Green Climate Fund, and also the national implementing entity by the Indian government for the National Adaptation Fund for Climate Change. And I'm happy to mention that as on date, being the direct access entity or the national implementing entity, NABARD has been able to facilitate, sanction and successful implementation of almost 40 big projects in different parts of the country, covering almost 29 states, which are mainly focusing on two basic areas. One is the climate smart agriculture on a massive scale. The second is the reducing the carbon footprints. So these are the broad parameter, broad objectives of these 40 projects, which NABARD has been facilitating and implementing through different implementing agencies in the country. Apart from this, we have our Watershed Development Program. In fact, we have dedicated fund for that to address the watershed development issues and the tribal communities' livelihood issues through increasing the fruit crops and tree cover in many of the areas, so that their dependence on the forest or the wild gets reduced and they get a livelihood opportunity on a sustainable basis. As on date, about 6 million of rural tribal families we have supported, we have covered under the country. Similarly, under the watershed program, we have covered almost 2.3 million hectares of area under different watershed programs, including climate proofing of these watersheds, so that the livelihood of those who are dependent on these watersheds gets improved on a sustainable basis. These are some of the interventions which NABARD has already initiated. The third area which we have taken, as I said, that it requires a lot of capacity building. When the investment has to be given a green color, then the projects have to be seen from the climate lens. So how to see the project from the climate lens? One is that we need additional resources from the international climate finances and other sources, be it a CSR or any other funding mechanism. But whatever investment that we are already having through the budgetary resources, through the banking channel, through the corporates, can we not convert some of them into a green financing, so that our dependence on the external funding for the climate actions, be it a mitigation or adaptation, can be reduced substantially? So with this in view, NABARD has already set up a climate change center at our Bird Campus, Lucknow, to build the capacities of the major stakeholders, particularly the banking officials, the corporates, those planning officials, the policy makers, so that they realize that the investments have to be directed towards the areas which are more green, which can address to some of these issues relating to the climate change. So that is another initiative which our institution has taken, and we are collaborating with not only the national level organizations, but also the international organizations, to help them build the capacities of all these stakeholders, those who are implementing the project, those who are thinking about the project, those who are appraising the projects, and those who are supporting these kind of projects. All have to be given these kind of capacity building programs, so that the green financing can be encouraged. Another important area which NABARD has taken, that we have internally have created a fund, what we call the climate change fund, basically to support these kind of interventions what we are having today. The interactions with different experts globally on the climate issues, different direct access entities, different in national implementing entities which are there in the world. I think we have the interaction across the table, so that the best practices which are operating elsewhere can be replicated in our country, and the best practices of our country can be replicated elsewhere. So a knowledge exchange program and knowledge sharing program is also being supported through NABARD, and not only those who are in the private sectors, but also those who are in the government sector, those who are in the corporate sector. NABARD is taking a lead to have these kind of interventions. The third point is regarding, as I said, about promoting the climate resilient agriculture. Globally, if I see the data, agriculture contributes about 17% of the emission globally. So agriculture does have some contribution to this, and to address those issues, the climate smart agriculture, the best practices with the help of the ICR and other institutions, NABARD is trying to promote in the rural areas, so that the emission which are taking place from the agricultural side can also be curtailed substantially. So these are some of the areas which we have already initiated, and I am happy to share that NABARD has been re-accredited by the Adaptation Fund Board recently, so that our commitment to the climate finances, mobilizing international resources for building the climate resilience of the rural community goes on unabated. If coming to the green finance, and I will conclude that way, as per the study shows that there are about 1.1 lakh crores of green finance flows into different sectors. And if I go ahead to share, the commercial banks basically contribute 39%, the government budget has 18%, public sector undertakings 12%, and corporates 5%. So some of the green financing flows is taking place, but as somebody has already mentioned, how to categorize that, whatever the investments are taking place from different sources, the portion of it goes as a green finance, and how to increase the share of the green funding and green financing for this particular activity. I think we need to focus more on the finer tools for appraisal of the projects, finer tools for identifying the right kind of projects, and mobilizing internal resources domestically as well as external sources for financing these kind of projects through proper channel. So NABARD basically has taken leadership role for building the capacities and portfolios of the banks, so that more and more green financing in this particular region can take place. NABARD is also taking initiative to build the capacities and resilience of the rural communities, so that the part of this can be shared by each and individuals in the country to fight against this global warming. I think some of these strategies I thought I will mention. Beyond that, there's an integrated farming system, the agroforestry project which NABARD is facilitating. I am happy to, in the morning itself, I was reading the newspaper which shows that as per the recent survey, the country has already achieved 25% of the green cover, including the forest. So that means that the policies and the practices are in the right direction. They are moving in the right direction. But only thing, the pace has to be speeded up, and that can come only through the proper planning and stakeholders synergy in the efforts, and taking everybody on board, so that it becomes the people's agenda rather than the agenda of particular government or particular sector. So with this, I once again thank the ICC, and it has always been a pleasure interacting with such eminent people on the climate issues. We hope to work towards this kind of interventions collectively, so that we come out with this kind of issues in a more successful manner. And I wish that this award function and this seminar organized by the ICC is very productive, fruitful, and very successful. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Khan, for your kind words, and also for sharing the NABARD perspective. I would now request Mr. Sanjay Budhia, past president of ICC, as well as MD of Pattern Group, to please share his perspective.
Very good morning and season's greetings to all. As Soma mentioned, as past president of Indian Chamber of Commerce, I would also like to add my own warm welcome to all the distinguished speakers. And let me share that this has been one of the best sessions I have been attending Environment Partnership Summit for years, earlier as the vice president, president, and of course during later years. But today, the kind of deliberations we have, I thank each one of you for your excellent deliberations, presentations, and letting us know what to do and how to go about. This shows the importance that each one of us assigns to environment and its management. As we all know, the effects of the climate change is no longer a prediction of the future, but we are already feeling its effect through droughts, untimely cyclones, prolonged heat waves, and changing of weather patterns. The effects of such are likely to affect our economies as well as our livelihood. According to one estimate, India may have already lost 3% of its gross domestic product GDP on account of climate change. However, India will stand to gain $11 trillion, that is close to 800 lakh crores in economic value in the next 50 years by taking corrective measures and limiting the rising global temperatures. In the recently concluded COP26 in Glasgow, India announced that it will commit to ambitious enhanced climate targets and cuts in carbon emissions in its nationally determined contributions. Besides these international commitments, the government has also set ambitious domestic targets for renewable energy, air quality, and others. To achieve this ambitious business, both big and small can play a stellar role. Dr. Kalyan Rudra, we have been together in this program for years. I agree everything what you say, but I would like to disagree with one point what you mentioned, that as a young boy you used to like winters. You are still young and you are getting younger. So this is one point I thought I must mention. You mentioned what is expected from industry, and as someone who is running about 6 industries here in Bengal, I would like to put on record the support, the kind of cooperative joint efforts government of West Bengal and through West Bengal Pollution Control Board industry is getting by holding hand together as friend, philosopher and guide. As rightly mentioned by everybody, we need to work together, and you as friend, philosopher and guide, you and your team. And I know in the subsequent technical session, we have Mr. Subrito Ghosh, the chief engineer. Your role must be put on record. As you rightly said, that we need to strike a balance between development and also we have to see the cost. And by striving towards emission reduction and net zero goals, we could come closer to achieving our goals and participate in those of the nation. To achieve sustainable growth, it has become essential for the industries to make pragmatic choices which will balance the benefit of development. It should ensure that development takes place in a planned and environmentally sustainable way. In certain cases where development choices may conflict with environmental concerns, the decision is to be taken rationally, as safe water, clean air, and sustainable use of natural resources are key elements to sustainable development. Of late, some sincere efforts have been initiated by organizations to implement EMS, Environmental Management System, in order to ensure the sustainability of collaborative project. Solid waste management tools and techniques should be adopted by manufacturers and production houses. Manufacturers should provide free recycling services. They should also focus on developing programs to manage the recycling of electronic devices. Although a lot of efforts have been taken to address the problem of India's e-waste management system, I am sure in coming years we will witness many more initiatives. Realizing the dreaded effects of climate change on sustainable businesses, corporates are taking into strides environmental, social, and governance (ESG), which has become the buzzword in their businesses to become more resilient by getting them ready for the impact of emerging issues. Even though the net zero target year announced during the COP26 is still some distance ahead, businesses are already realizing climate change as a tangible risk, and the financial gains from mitigation are more than evident than ever before. Climate innovations present a clear pathway to tackle climate change and achieve the transition to a low carbon future. From industry leaders, clean tech and environmental startups addressing issues of air pollution, energy efficiency, and mobility, various solutions offer immediate and practical solutions to climate change, which offers tremendous opportunities for the startups in the environment sector. Before I close, I would like to reiterate that it is our combined responsibility to walk the talk. Thank you all. Thank you once again.
Thank you very much, sir. May I now request Mr. Nick Lowe, British Deputy High Commissioner in Kolkata, for his address.
I'm so sorry. Are you able to hear me?
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
And do you have video?
Yes, we do have.
Oh, bad luck. Okay. I've been looking at the timetable for the event, and we are very late indeed, are we not? Rajiv, would it be helpful if I either didn't speak at all or spoke very briefly?
We definitely want to hear you out. So whether you speak briefly or you take your sufficient time, it's up to you. But we definitely would like you to speak.
Okay, well, look, thank you very much. This is one of those events that kind of dates you. This will be the third time I've done this, one of my favorite events in the calendar. Rajiv, colleagues, I'm very grateful indeed to you for inviting me once again to do so. Suryadeep, if you're in a position to take a screenshot of this, I'd be obliged, because this is a good event, it's an important event, and I would like to put it on social media.
Sure, sir.
Some really, really good interventions by colleagues previously. Atul, in particular, what you said about a lot still to do rings very true. It reminds me of the phrase that Tony Blair used in the 2001 general election in the United Kingdom. A lot done and a lot still to do. To an extent, I'm going to give the focus in what I'm going to say to the lot that's been done, because I think it's easy to be maudlin about this and think, oh my God, you know, we're only just starting to address this. In actual fact, I think a lot has been achieved, and we shouldn't lose sight of that. That's good psychology, that we give ourselves credit for what we've done. What I'm going to do is take a little look back at COP26. Now, this interests me. Over the last 15 months, I've spent more of my time working on COP26 than any other issue. And when I speak to people about it, people have read the newspapers, people have got a good sense of what happened. But when I say, so were you happy with it? Do you think it was successful? People don't really seem to know. Maybe it's a little bit of an information overload, and maybe the reporting of it, which focused very heavily on what happened on the final day, and China and India asking for language on the phasing out of coal to be adopted. I think that caught the headlines. So now that the dust has settled on COP26, I'm going to give you a sense of the dynamics of it, the how, if you like, as well as what it achieved, the what. Before considering the policy issues, let me say very briefly, and I'm aware I do this as a participant in a virtual meeting, remembering the hurdles we faced before a single delegate arrived in Glasgow. COP26 was the world's largest major conference during the pandemic. It was always going to be costly, it was always going to be complex, and that became hugely more the case because of the pandemic. I mean, the obstacles to success, frankly, were enormous. But in COVID terms and operational terms, it was a quite remarkable achievement. And I don't say that to blow the trumpet of the United Kingdom and of Italy as the host, but as a tribute to all those who took part. We had a total of 38,000 visitors to the COP Blue Zone over the 2 weeks of the conference, an average attendance of around about 13,000 people a day. Yet thanks to the very high vaccination rates amongst delegates and our rigorous test and trace regime, infection rates at COP ran at about a quarter of those in the surrounding community in Glasgow. That was a huge achievement. That actually shows that physical events, even at that scale, do not need to belong to the history books, however long the pandemic lasts. Now, measuring success from a policy perspective is obviously more complicated, and a great many non-state actors will never be satisfied. And actually, we're glad there won't be. Looking at what Barack Obama said at the conference, we do want young people to be angry, and we do want them to hold the feet to the fire of people like me. to drive forward progress. That's very, very important that happens. But I mean, I have to say, by any of the measures that we set ourselves beforehand, COP26 was a success. So let's look at the key 4 areas that we'd staked out beforehand. The first, mitigation, and we adopted this soundbite, keep 1.5 alive. Now, what did that mean? Agreeing steps to accelerate action in negotiated text, assembled sufficient 2030 NDCs, nationally determined contributions, assembled sufficient net zero commitments and other measures to show that the goal of limiting the rise in global temperatures to 1.5 degrees remained priority and remain within reach. On finance, and this is something that Atul mentioned earlier and others no doubt have, it's delivering $100 billion a year goal from 2021 to 2025, both for itself because it's the right thing to do, but also to shore up the support of emerging economies for ambitious climate action, to mobilize trillions of private sector finance that we need to keep 1.5 alive, and to deliver on a significant set of finance mandates, including, of course, the start of negotiations and discussions on a new goal. The third one was adaptation and loss and damage, delivering adaptation finance, progress on the global goal on adaptation, and operationalizing the Santiago network on loss and damage. And lastly, on collaboration, hugely important, delivering a negotiated resolution of the outstanding Paris rulebook issues, particularly Article 6, and working through plurilateral groupings to accelerate climate action in support of the above. Ladies and gentlemen, I posit that in all of those we achieved a really big degree of success. Now, neither the operational document nor much of the UK media reporting on COP26 gave a true sense of what happened, or did we do as well as we hoped. The UK media inevitably focused on the final hour of the conference when, in a dramatic term, and as you'll all know, India and China teamed up to block language relating to the phase out of coal and fossil fuel subsidies and replace it with language calling for a phasing down and inserting a caveat on subsidies. Now, to some extent, the media is right that that represented something of a watering down, but what wasn't captured at all is that we still secured, and we is the international community, okay? This is for all of us, not just for the UK, one planet. We still secured language that was far more ambitious than we thought possible, even just 3 weeks before the summit. In other words, if you'd said on the eve of the summit, we'd have had a scenario where we'd have agreed the Paris rulebook, common timeframes, transparency, Article 6, where we'd have accelerated action on limiting warming to 1.5 degrees, where we'd have delivered $500 billion across 2021 to 2025, where we would verifiably have bent the curve on emissions and delivered a safe and secure summit. I tell you, we'd have taken that enthusiastically. We worked hard with all the parties to make that happen. And as I've already said, it really was a collective achievement. In Glasgow itself, the dynamics began well with the World Leaders Summit. It was the largest such event my country had ever hosted. And what was noticeable was that leaders were clearly energized by their first significant gathering in years, and that really underlined the need for COP26 to accelerate action by 2030 to keep 1.5 degrees alive. And there were really some standout strong country commitments early on. Vietnam pledged net zero 2050 and led a really strong ASEAN showing. Kenya made a similar pledge. And that was significant, showing that one of Africa's largest economies saw nothing to fear in ambitious climate action. India, of course, set a net zero 2070 target that will further accelerate its already remarkably impressive investments in renewable energy. Now, a number of external bodies have now crunched those figures, the figures announced in Glasgow, and there's an emerging agreement that 2030 commitments alone will bring climate change onto a 2.4 degrees pathway. And if longer term net zero commitments are also delivered, it could limit it to as low as 1.8 degrees. Clearly, it's not where we want to be. But with the agreement to revisit 2030 ambition again this year, the prospect of limiting warming to 1.5 degrees is still very much alive. There are also a large number of important sectoral initiatives, and I hope you forgive me if I run the ruler over some of these because they really are important. The Forest Declaration was a huge achievement. Countries that account for over 90% of the world's forest committing to halt and reverse deforestation by 2030, and $12 billion of public funds committed to protect and restore forests alongside $7.2 billion of private investment. We then had the Glasgow Breakthroughs Agenda, which was launched at the World Leaders Summit. One commentator called it the single most important element to come out of COP26, that committed countries to work together in each sector to make clean solutions the most economically attractive option. We had the Methane Pledge, which, given the potency of methane, will have a discernible effect on global warming over the next decade. It covers over 40% of global methane emissions. On Finance Day, we demonstrated that investment flows will increasingly be helping to support transition to a low carbon economy. With the $8.5 billion South African Just Energy Transition announcement, I think a very visible and very important demonstration of that. The conference's Energy Day saw over 20 countries make new commitments to phase out coal power, and that included some of the world's largest coal power generators, Vietnam, Indonesia, South Korea, and Poland, to name a few. The Clean Energy Transition document was a significant, and I have to say, an unexpected advance. 34 countries, including all of the G7, with the exception of Japan, signing up to end international financing of fossil fuels. We were delighted by that because it's in line with current UK practice, and that kicks in at the end of this year, a really front-loaded commitment. And our Transport Day had fewer new commitments, but reflected real progress made over the course of the UK's campaign in the lead-up to COP26. Around a third of the global car market is now covered by commitments to a Paris-aligned pace of transition. Okay, doesn't sound much, does it? Around a third. But you think a year ago, we were pretty much at zero. So that's a tremendous amount of progress. I've already spoken about what happened right at the end, and I think that was significant. You know, always look at the evidence. What did the decision of India and China to, if you like, water down that language of coal tell us? Well, it reflects the reality, and it reflected the continuing strength of domestic interests on fossil fuels in a number of countries. That is where we are. It's what we've got to deal with. We're not pointing fingers, we're not throwing stones. And in part, it reflects the reality. The reality is the G7 group of countries is only going to account for around about 15% of global emissions by 2030 versus the 65% global emissions that will be accounted for by the other 13 G20 member states. And this again shows the importance of bringing that finance that other speakers have mentioned online. It's a year later than we'd hoped, but it is there. That $500 billion will happen, and it's not from last year as we'd wished, but it will happen from this year. We lost some of the language on coal, but look, let us not forget the language that was agreed was unprecedented. The first time in 30 years of UN negotiations that we've got a reference, any reference at all, in negotiated text to the most polluting fossil fuel. And this is now one of the main future areas of focus for conference of parties as we go forward. It's going to be one of the first things that people will look for. So let's just run the ruler very briefly over the other key achievements that remain. We established 1.5 degrees as a principal benchmark for success. It needs to be. We've got that language on coal, and importantly, specific text on ending fossil fuel subsidies. We got real world climate action and the language of economic opportunity through green growth into the UN FCCC debate. The negotiated outcomes are not just words. Closing the Paris rulebook was an incredibly significant achievement and will have very real world outcomes in terms of enabling emissions trading and securing the transparency of reporting. And it also accelerates the timeframe for countries to revisit their NDCs and sets up the important global stock take in 2023. Now, what really a lot of that means is a large part of the success of the United Kingdom as a presidency of COP, and indeed what we all did at COP26, will only be able to be assessed after COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh this year. So there's a continued need for my country as COP president up until we hand over the baton to Egypt later this year to do some heavy lifting. We will continue to be strongly engaged in this debate, as I know Melinda, who's speaking next, I know the United States will be, and a lot of our other partner countries will be. We have no bigger or more important partner in all of this than India. We're doing some great work with India at the municipal level, at the regional level, and at central government level. We're delighted by that, and that will continue. And for our friends at the Indian Chamber, thank you very much for working with us so assiduously over the last year or more on this debate, and we look forward to having this continue. I wish you luck with the rest of the conference. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lowe. I would now move on. Request Ms. Melinda Pavek, Consul General of the US Consulate General in Kolkata, to please address us.
Thank you so much. Good morning and Happy New Year to our esteemed speakers, panelists, participants, and viewers. I must admit, this is my first time at this event, but I echo the compliments that others have made about how impressive the speakers have been and how in-depth and important the conversation has been. I want to express my appreciation to the Indian Chamber of Commerce for inviting me. Your efforts through events like this one encourage businesses to adopt environmentally sustainable technologies and influence the creation of policies that lead to a more resilient, sustainable, and greener economy. You are to be commended for the excellent discussions today. The United States has placed climate change at the center of its foreign policy, diplomacy, and national security. Bold action to tackle the climate crisis is now more urgent than ever. To meet the global climate challenge head-on, the Biden-Harris administration has committed to reducing US emissions by 50 to 52% by 2030. It is a whole of government effort with new policies and initiatives being announced regularly. During the very successful COP26, which Nick just did such a great job of describing, President Biden, Secretary of State Blinken, and Special Presidential Envoy for Climate Kerry launched multiple initiatives to underline US commitments to ambitious climate action. Let me briefly describe three of them. One, the leaders released a long-term strategy of the United States called Pathways to Net Zero Greenhouse Gas Emissions by 2050. It presents a vision for achieving our economy-wide goal to reach net zero emissions no later than 2050, which is consistent with keeping the global 1.5 degrees Celsius trajectory within reach. Two, the United States unveiled the President's Emergency Plan for Adaptation and Resilience, also known as PREPARE. PREPARE is the largest commitment ever made by the United States to help reduce and manage climate impacts to the world's most vulnerable nations. And 3, the First Movers Coalition initiative was announced. It is a public-private partnership between the US State Department and the World Economic Forum, through which 34 companies valued at $6 trillion made ambitious purchasing commitments to confront the climate crisis this decade by speeding clean energy technology innovation in need-to-abate sectors. US companies like Amazon, Apple, Boeing, Delta, and United Airlines, and others, along with Indian companies, Dalmia Cement and the Mahindra Group, joined the partnership as founding members. The initial focus will be on steel, trucking, shipping, and aviation. The remaining sectoral commitments will launch in early 2022. If you are interested in learning more about this initiative, details are available on the World Economic Forum website. Extreme weather events exacerbated by climate change cost the United States billions of dollars in economic damages and incalculable losses in human and cultural realms. On December 8th, 2021, President Biden signed an historic executive order demonstrating how the US federal government will lead by example in tackling the climate crisis while creating good jobs for American workers and making our country more economically competitive. Through the new executive order and the federal sustainability plan, the federal government will leverage its portfolio of 300,000 buildings, fleet of 600,000 cars and trucks, an annual purchasing power of $650 million to do 3 things. First, we will transition federal infrastructure to zero-emission vehicles and buildings powered by carbon pollution-free electricity, which will reduce the federal government's greenhouse gas emissions by 65% by 2030. Second, we will make federal agencies more adaptive and resilient to the impacts of climate change and increase the sustainability of federal supply chains, achieving net zero emissions from federal procurement by 2050. Third, we will mainstream sustainability within the federal workforce, advance equity and environmental justice, and leverage partnerships to accelerate progress. Through our actions at home and our leadership abroad, the United States is doing its part to build a zero carbon future that creates good jobs and ensures a healthy, livable planet for generations to come. As we have also said, the cascading impacts of the climate crisis do not discriminate by nations or borders. No country can solve the climate crisis alone, and everyone must do their part. That is why the United States and India are partnering, and both have set ambitious 2030 targets for climate action and clean energy. The US-India Climate and Clean Energy Agenda 2030 partnership, led by President Biden and Prime Minister Modi, supports the achievement of India's ambitious targets as announced at COP26. The partnership will increase financing and accelerate the deployment of clean energy and will proceed along 2 main tracks: the Climate Action and Finance Mobilization Dialogue and the Strategic Clean Energy Partnership. Working together, the United States and India will develop innovative clean technologies needed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in industry, transportation, power, and construction today and into the future. Our Foreign Commercial Service team stands ready to forge collaborations between US companies and local government and private businesses in the environment technology sector. FCS assists American environmental technology companies seeking to enter the Indian market and also helps Indian companies and government entities identify technology providers for environmental infrastructure projects in India. FCS organizes delegations of Indian companies and government officials to environmental trade shows in the United States. 2 examples are the Waste Expo for municipal waste management and WEFTech for water and wastewater treatment technologies. In March, FCS is organizing a webinar on greenhouse gas emissions and greenhouse gas mitigation technologies for India's steel industry. FCS also organizes and supports trade and investment missions of American businesses to India. a virtual delegation of US clean air technology companies is also poised to engage India later this year. For those of you interested in investing in the United States in building back better and greening, FCS is registering potential Indian investors for the annual Select USA Investment Summit scheduled for June 26th through 29th in Washington. The Select USA Summit is the premier event showcasing investment opportunities in the United States. The last two editions, of course, were done virtually, and we know there is great interest in having a strong in-person representation from Eastern India in this year's event. Bringing smart public and private sector people together to share ideas, identify investment opportunities, and exchange best practices are a priority for my team. Another priority is engaging the innovation of youth and academia around improving air quality. As Dr. Rudro explained earlier, air quality is critical, and especially in West Bengal. According to WHO data, air pollution kills 7 million people annually, more than COVID. My public diplomacy team is providing grants and engaging with Indian entities to find solutions to these environmental challenges. For example, with Kalinga Institute of Industrial Technology, we have launched an air quality hackathon titled Airathon. Young participants from East and Northeast Indian states will strive to identify solutions to improve air quality in this region during a 2-day hackathon, which will be followed by field testing of the top 3 ideas. The hackathon results will be shared with policy experts in government and civil society for possible implementation. And it is not only the air that needs attention, but also our waste management systems. As noted by Dr. Bagai, plastic waste is a growing menace. When humans created plastic, it seemed like a miracle product, but now we must deal with what happens when streams, lakes, and rivers carry plastic from land to sea, and how that pollution harms marine biodiversity and our own food chains, among other challenges that it creates. To tackle the problem of plastic waste management, we are leading a project titled Ichamati Kata. It is examining the effectiveness of plastic waste management policies and regulations along the Ichamati River, a river shared by India and Bangladesh. 4 urban locations and 1 location in the Sundarbans Delta region in West Bengal are in focus in this important research project. From the global to the multilateral, to the bilateral, to the local levels, from leaders to students, from the actions of US government agencies working actively in India, I have highlighted only a fraction of the initiatives that we already have underway to act together and do what it takes to protect our planet and our future. COP26 helped summon more ambition to face this emergency than the world has ever seen. Still, a gap remains between the ambition the world demonstrated and the actions we need to solve this challenge. So I'm asking you, how are you, the participants of this event, the leaders, problem solvers, and decision makers, envisioning and creating the new technologies, processes, projects, and collaborations that will help achieve our climate ambitions? What have you done today, or this week, or this month, or this decade? I urge you to take on this challenge wholeheartedly. The future of our children and grandchildren depends on us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pavek, for asking the most important question at the end of the session. I would now request Dr. Rajiv Singh, Director General of Indian Chamber of Commerce, to please deliver the vote of thanks.
Good morning. I think we had very engaging, insightful, and meaningful deliberations by all our guests. I must say, as Mr. Budia also mentioned, probably this is one of the best event of ICC on environment and we all agree that it's a common issue, it's a common challenge impacting all of us, all the nations, segments of the economies, and also the society at large. There is also consensus that we need to work together. We need to collaborate. And many speakers have also highlighted that it's not only something which the policymakers or the governments at the highest level can address. There is a need for partnership and collaboration among industry, academia, the transport sector. Agriculture is a big contributor to it. Meat processing industry is another big contributor to the greenhouse gases. And of course, we need the involvement of people at large. I'm sure deliberations like this go a long way, and ICC team will be capturing some of the key inputs and ideas, what we have got. And as ICC, I can say that we'll be more than happy to collaborate and work with all of you. May I convey our sincere thanks to all our speakers. I would start with the CG of US, Ms. Melinda Pavic, briefing us about what US is doing, and at the end asking a very pertinent question. I think that is the question which every citizen has to ask. So thank you for your insights. Let me also thank Mr. Nick Lowe, British Deputy High Commission, for his presence and also taking us through what happened in Glasgow and going ahead, what are the priority areas and how India, UK, and the global community can collaborate together. I would also like to thank Dr. A.R. Khan for taking us through what NABARD is doing. What we understand, NABARD has a big focus on the rural and agri sector, and ICC will again be happy to work with you. Let me also thank Mr. Atul Bagai, Head of UNEP India Office, for his presence and his kind deliberations. Let me also thank Dr. Kalyan Rudro for sharing some very interesting and useful insights on Bengal and how the pollution is impacting air, water, and the entire ecology of the state, and how industry and the government can partner. I would also like to thank Dr. Vibha Dhawan, who represented Terry. Terry has been a long-standing partner, and we look forward to working with them. Last but not least, I would also like to thank ICC past president and Mr. Sanjay Budia, and also Mr. Alok Mukherjee for their valuable presence, insights. Mr. Mukherjee has been guiding us through the entire process of evaluation, awards, and giving his ideas in terms of how the agenda should be framed. With this, let me thank all our friends from media, all our partners, and all the participants. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Before we close this session, may I request our guests and speakers, honorable speakers, to please switch on your cameras for a short while so that we can take a group photo.
Will somebody also say cheese?
Okay, thank you very much. So thank you very much. We will go ahead with the award announcements. So if some of you are still around, you may like to have a look at the Environment Excellence Award winners this year. So I'll just share. So we have now come to the interesting moment of announcement of the Environment Excellence Awards. This has been the 15th edition, and I'm happy to share that we had more than 22 companies who participated from across the country. As we, this has been, like I said, it's the 15th edition, and it's one of the most coveted awards in Eastern India on environment. I would like to thank our jury members led by Mr. Alok Mukherjee, Professor Siddhartha Dotto, Professor Arunabh Majumdar, Professor K. M. Agarwal, Mr. Ronodev Mitro, and our Consultivo, Mr. Shoikat Basu, Chief Mentor of Consultivo, who has been the knowledge partner and has been helping us with the entire framework. So thank you very much. So we'll just move on to the awards. The certificates of appreciation this year go to Pernod Ricard India. They have participated for the first time. They have put up a brave front, and I'm sure with the feedback that they received from the jury, we will have more to see from them. Philips Carbon Black, Durgapur, Assam Carbon Products Limited, Guwahati, and Toliganj Club. Thank you for participating, and we would like to see you more, and your efforts will be appreciated, I'm sure, further as we move on. In the manufacturing and engineering sector, small enterprise category, the special jury recognition goes to Assam Carbon Products Limited, Patancheru. Congratulations. And in the medium enterprise category, the joint special jury recognition awards go to India Carbon Guwahati and India Carbon Boj Boj. Congratulations once again to the India Carbon team. In the manufacturing and engineering cement large enterprise category, a special jury recognition for good work done in sustainability goes to Dalmia Cement Bharat Limited, Unit Bengal Cement Works. Congratulations, Dalmia Cement Bharat, for the commendable work and for impressing our jury members in this journey. I would like to congratulate Mr. Ambuj Srivastav and his team for this award. In the large enterprise category in manufacturing and engineering, the second joint runners-ups are ITC Limited Munger and ITC Limited Saharanpur. Congratulations to both the teams from ITC. And the joint first runners-up are Holdia Petrochemicals Limited and TRL Krosaki Limited. I would like to congratulate Mr. Ashok Ghosh and his team from Haldia Petrochemicals and Dr. Tarapado Das and his team from TRL Krosaki for the award. The winner in this category is JSW Steel Limited, Salem Works. Congratulations, heartiest congratulations to the team and to Mr. B.N. Prakash Rao and his team for this wonderful achievement. We will like to see more from you and your team in the coming years. In the construction and infrastructure sector, the runner-up is Larsen Tubro Limited, Heavy Civil Infrastructure IC from Chennai. I would like to congratulate Mr. Michael William Sanderson and his team for this wonderful achievement, and heartiest congratulations to you too. The joint winners are Afcons Infrastructure Limited, Mumbai, and Godrej Properties Limited, Godrej Amethyst Developers LLP. Congratulations to both the winners, and I would like to congratulate Mr. Shekhar Das and Mr. Shubho Chakrabarti for this achievement. In the power and utility sector, the runner-up is CESC Limited, Southern Generating Station. Mr. Krishnendu Saur and his team, heartiest congratulations. And the winner is CESC Limited, Boj Boj Generating Station. Please, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, put a hand together for the achievement of CESC Boj Boj Generating Station. I would like to congratulate Mr. Sanjay Dotto and his team for this achievement. In the services sector, the runner-up is the team from Wipro. Heartiest congratulations to you for coming for this award. And the winner is Tata Consultancy Limited from the Siruseri Works. The Due to COVID, they were not able to send us a photograph, but we have put up the awards that they have received. In the mining sector, the jury has given a high recognition award for work done in sustainability to Hindustan Zinc Limited, Rajpura Dariba Mines. Heartiest congratulations to the team from Hindustan Zinc for this achievement. So we come to the end of the awards announcement. Thank you very much. Wish you all a very happy new year. And then we will move on to the next session, which is the technical session of this Environment Partnership Summit. So in our technical session, we have Mr. Shudipto Mukherjee, Executive Director Generation of CESC Limited. He will be the session moderator. We have with us Mr. Ajay Bandopadhyay, Senior Operations Officer of IFC World Bank Group, and Dr. K. M. Agarwal, Professor and former Dean of IISWBM, and Professor Ornavo Mujumdar, Professor Emeritus, SWRE and Jadavpur University, and ex-director and Professor, All India Institute of Hygiene and Public Health. So over to you, Mr. Mukherjee, for leading the deliberation of the technical session.
Thank you, Shoma, and good afternoon, the August gathering here, our distinguished speakers who participated in the inaugural session, and our co-speakers here, three learned speakers, as we have come to know. This morning was absolutely, we had a very good session, and it is absolutely prudent and right topic to be selected for this deliberations. So we have set the tone, and we know that what the policy guidelines are there, how we need to go about. Now this time we will slightly go it down and talk in detail how to implement this in our practice, and what is the role of the corporates and the industries to mitigate the environmental impacts. Friends, we are at a very difficult crossroads. On one end, we are a developing economy, and we need to grow phenomenally to keep pace within the global economy. Our per capita energy consumption is almost 1/3 of the global average and 1/10 of the developed economies. And it is steadily growing at a 5% to 6% CAGR. But at the same time, we know that these rapid industrializations also call for challenges to combat in the environmental aspects. There are large-scale deforestations. There are enormous usage of natural resources, which perhaps can be substituted. But we, on the sake of it, development, we try to ignore some of it. But both the things should coexist. India has to grow, as well as we need to protect our economy. So we have a large role to play to keep the balance for developing a sustainable economy, resilient per se. Otherwise, it is likely to fail. We know that we had several devastations apart from the pandemic where we are in. We had Amphan, which happened after about 200 years. But news are coming that it is likely to occur every alternate years. So we had so many devastations across the globe, which are unprecedented and which are probably the effect of some of the activities driven by the mankind. So we have a role to play, not only we as an individual, our industries, our mindset has to go for a drastic change to survive in the battle and grow for the economies as well. So we have very learned speakers here with me. and we will listen from them what is their thought in regard to the mitigation of climate challenges. We start with Mr. Ajay Bandyopadhyay, Senior Operation Officer of IFC, and he will talk on industrial decarbonization opportunities for Indian industry. Over to you, Mr. Bandyopadhyay, for your talk.
Thank you, Mr. Mukherjee. And thanks ICC for inviting me in this very interesting session. Of course, I attended and participated in the Environmental Partnership Summit earlier. So it's always very encouraging for me to come back and speak on various topics in this particular forum. And certainly a big congratulations to all the companies who have won the award today. It's really heartening to see their initiatives on the environmental front. Today, since it's a technical session, so I thought about sharing some perspective on the topic of decarbonization and net zero. And I have also a few slides to share. Of course, a brief presentation, and these are more like the thought-provoking discussion starters on the subject. So what we see that, decarbonization and net zero are gaining a lot of momentum among the Indian industries. It's not only because there are the big commitments which the industries are seeing at a national level. For example, India has committed the 2070 goal for net zero. Many other advanced nations have committed even a far more aggressive targets to achieve the net zero some by 2030, some by 2050. But at the same time, there are certain definite drivers in the business environment, which is in fact driving the companies to adopt the decarbonization strategy and integrate that with their business strategies. So things like the gradual reduction of the cost of some of the greener technologies, things like the rise of the carbon market, things like more aggressive actions by some of the large corporate houses. These are all creating a good momentum for companies to get into this domain. But at the same time, I would also highlight in my presentations, there are growing concerns. There are concerns around access to technology for the emerging world, especially for companies in India, Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka, and a lot of countries in the African nations. The concerns around not only the big companies, because many of the big companies perhaps have the wherewithal, but how the small and the medium scale companies get access to resources, the knowledge, technology, and the financial resources to adopt some of these greener practices. There are definite concerns about finance, because many of the companies, they are hearing about the whole commitment around $100 billion and all, which are not really maturing over a period of time. So are there alternative ways to finance their decarbonization actions? So there are concerns around that front as well. There are also concerns around what we today see called the greenwashing. So the companies are talking a lot, but doing precious little on the topics of decarbonization and the climate change. So there are a lot of PR campaign, but the on-the-ground investments are too little, and which is also creating a lot of setback in terms of the achieving the national goal and the international commitments. So few of the actions that we see today, as we just highlighted in the slide, that as we concluded the COP26 recently, almost 91% of the world has pledged for net zero, and that's a big positive vibes. There are 2,000 largest companies of the world who are representing the sales of so much of the $1 billion. They have committed to the net zero target. Nearly 33% of the global assets under management have the ESG matrices during their investment decision. And this, I would say, a remarkable shift on the climate change and the environmental front, what we have seen even 5 years before or 10 years before, and what we are seeing now, because investors are becoming the far more particular, far more pressing on the companies for their climate change disclosure, for their environmental social governance disclosure. And there are incidences where the large investors, the large private equity houses are withdrawing from the investments where they don't see that clear linkages in terms of the green commitment or the environmental commitment. There is also one thing which is very remarkable, that as some of the large companies, you have seen the names over here, like Microsoft, the Google, and the Amazons of the world, they are pledging for net zero. It's not just their own operations, because it's easier to decarbonize a Microsoft's own operations, which is basically a service company. But they are also extending some of their goals more gradually to their entire supply chain. Companies like Microsoft, companies like Amazon, or the companies like, say, Nestle, Pepe Jeans, the Adidas, they work with a large number of suppliers across the globe. And as they are extending these targets even to their suppliers, it is both the opportunity as well as the investment required for the companies who are present in the emerging markets as a part of the supply chain to become green and be more competitive, to be included in the supply chain of some of the large global companies. Finally, we also see there is a surge in the climate financing. So although many of the governments, especially from the advanced countries, they faltered on the $100 billion commitment which was agreed at the Paris Climate Summit. And we see a lot of noises, a lot of discussions around that. But at the same time, the capital market is responding in a far more encouraging manner to provide the alternative avenues for financing to the private sector, and as well as to some of the large public sector units on the climate front. So you will find in the newspaper things like sustainability-linked finances, sustainability-linked bond. The green bond was already there, but it's gaining the popularity. There are many other new generation instruments which are coming in place from the capital market, which is helping the companies to achieve their decarbonization goal and the climate change goal in particular. There are certain concerns in the horizon, like the border adjustment carbon tax from the European Union and how that's going to impact the trade dynamics in the whole region. But still, this is something in the discussion phase, and we are yet to have a clarity around this regulation. But certainly, it makes sense for some of the so-called carbon intensive sectors, like the steel, like fertilizer, aluminium, and cement, which have been proposed to be part of this border adjustment tax mechanism, to take proactive actions to go green, so that if this regulation comes, they don't really lose out in the global climate play. So I won't spend much time on these things, but we have already seen quite a good number of actions from India, and a part of India's national determined commitments. India has committed to net zero by 2070. While this is really a laudable goal, but it's also ambitious, to be very honest, because although we have set a target, we have achieved the targets on the renewable front, but we also have a large power supply generation from the coal, and that needs to be understood, that how this transition is going to happen. And this whole transition calls for a lot of pains and tribulation in the economy as well as to the financial sector. So while these targets and the commitments, the pledges are good, but there also need to be very calibrated, careful actions from the part of the government as well as with the private sector to achieve this goal in a far more strategic fashions without harming the economy and the social fabric, especially in the post-COVID-19 scenario. So just to give you a highlight that this is a study where we see that there are 8 major sectors, and say food, construction, fashion, FMCG, electronics, auto, professional services. And the reason for not choosing that each of these sectors are highly carbon intensive, perhaps we have other carbon intensive sectors also, but these are the sectors which have the large presence in their supply chain. So when we look at these sectors, especially there are 4 areas which are contributing to major carbon emissions from the sector. One is the land use, which is typically for the agriculture, related to agriculture and the forestry. Heavy industries, so all the sectors which have a heavy industry linkage, for example, electronics, which has an industry linkage related to mining and the manufacturing. The things like FMCG, which has an industry linkage related to chemicals and the plastics. These are actually the carbon contributing part of the supply chain. And if the supply chain needs to be greened, needs to be made more less carbon intensive, then that's the part where the majority of the action needs to focus on. Now, this particular diagram gives an interesting revelation, and this is based on certain current research, that when we look at again the supply chain of these 8 industry sectors, which has a backward and the forward linkages in terms of their supply chain, perhaps the 40% of the emissions can be reduced at a relatively lesser cost, the cheaper cost, and which typically we say that these are the low-hanging fruits. So where the technologies are available and where there are established best practices which the private sector and the government can adopt to reduce emission. However, there are 60% of the technology which are highly expensive and perhaps non-existent today. And that has also been highlighted in one of the reports by International Energy Agency, that as we are talking about the net zero goal, now the means to achieve that goal, which is technology, sometimes and perhaps in most of the cases, the technology is either at the pre-commercialization phase or the technology is perhaps not existent today. Or it's rather that even if the technology is existing, perhaps it's very expensive and the market is not really ready to absorb that technology at this point of time. So what the companies are thinking, from International Finance Corporation, we are in fact engaged in a multiple different forms with the companies across the world, and these are from the wide sample of the companies. There are the regional players, there are the local players, and there are also the large global players having vast supply chain linkages across the world, across Asia, across Africa, East Europe, and many other phases. So if we crystallize some of the responses, which is becoming a top of the mind agenda for management related to climate change, first of all, very clearly, everybody is talking about the Paris aligning their business plan. Now, Paris alignment is not something very easy, because if you look at the Paris Agreement goals, then while you need to align your emission trajectory with a 1.5 degrees Celsius or even a 2 degrees Celsius, at the same time, you also need to some way or other de-risk your business model from the emerging climate risks, and which is not something an easy thing to do. Perhaps on the net zero commitment, some of the companies are pretty proactive to reduce their own emissions, which often termed as a scope 1 and the scope 2 emissions. But what about a scope 3? So an oil company and say a petroleum refinery, when they're saying that we want to be net zero, but we say that, hey, okay, you are producing the fuel which is already causing emissions beyond your boundary. So how consistent those targets and commitments are with respect to what is actually stated in the Paris Climate Agreement and in sync with the Paris goal. Second, I just also mentioned the access to climate finance. Now, I would come to these sections in a bit of a detail in my last slide. The third area linking to the global value chain, and here also I mentioned that as companies are spreading their wings across the world, they are sourcing from different countries, they are selling to other countries. There are emergence of the large platform companies like Amazon, like Google or Microsoft of the world. It's also creating a very different dynamics how the net zero commitment or decarbonization will be managed, not by this commitment of these companies alone, but taking into cognizance of their entire supply chain. So which creates opportunity, which also creates the short-term pains for some of the companies to really start thinking out of the box and make investments towards that. There is a huge risk of the stranded assets, and this is a big risk also now to the financial community, because just think of some of the countries where the companies today are investing in high carbon assets, sometimes knowingly, sometimes also unknowingly, in a sense where they perhaps do not have the access to right technology at this point of time. So in next 20 to 30 years, during the lifetime of that particular technology, it will create the emissions. Now, tomorrow, if the country takes a net zero target and very a tough stance to replace those technology or to get out of those technologies, then the huge amount of the financial commitment from the financial sectors, be it as a part of the equity or the loan, will become unproductive, what we call the non-performing assets. So that's what this transition risk poses to the financial community as well as to the companies. What will they do with that finance which has already been extended? So that's where need the whole concept of the transition finance, that while the existing assets will keep on running for a certain period of time, how the companies would be guided to gradually come out of those high carbon assets and strategically invest in the low carbon assets over a period of time. And last but not the least, the improvement in operating margin, where which is the argument now everyone understands across the board, that decarbonization is not only something good for the climate and the society, but it improves their operating margin and makes them more competitive. So we broadly see that there are primarily the three major areas by which the companies or everybody is trying to achieve decarbonization. One, by decarbonizing the energy, so the smart energy management, then electrifying the processes. Some of them are making very advanced investment in electrifying the manufacturing process. So where you make steel not through the blast furnace route, but electrification of the electrolysis of the iron ore. Now, these are the technologies which are pretty much at a pre-commercialization stage, and perhaps take another 5 or 10 years down the line to come mainstream. But good amount of the innovation financing are also going into some of these areas. The second dimension is the circular economy. Now, when we talk about circular economy, we often come with an idea that it just talks about waste management, talks about recycling. Yes, it does talk about that, but it also has an impact on decarbonization, perhaps has a very significant impact by dematerialization, reducing the material for demand for the high carbon products, and also looping it back into the system so that the demand for the mining of the virgin material comes down. So Circular economy is the second dimension, and the third dimension, which is sustainable logistics, where companies talking about the zero carbon logistics, use of electric vehicle, and the biofuels usage, etc. Now, having said that, there are also certain very visible risks in the decarbonization front, and one of the things that we see today, there are overriding emphasis on many of the decarbonization policies or the strategies across the countries on electric vehicle. And we know that the situations the whole sector is today facing due to the shortage of one single item, which is the chip, and which is not only delaying the production, but also jeopardizing a lot of plans for the companies. And this one single item chip is not just a very important element just for electric vehicle, but it's there in almost every appliances, every instruments at industrial level, commercial level, and the residential level we use. So as a company, when we are calibrating our plans, when we are developing our plans for decarbonization net zero, it's utmost importance we understand some of the risks in the horizon. These are the macro risks. These are the supply chain risks which have the certain impact on the time scale, the investment the companies are making towards decarbonization. So I won't go much deep into that, but it's just a highlight of how the decarbonization opportunities are emerging, not just one particular sector, but across various sectors of the economy. And in India particular, we see that a lot of policy traction to make some of these sectors to go green or low carbon in a much more accelerated fashion. Now, again, coming to at the company level, more and more we see the response of the companies becoming very strategic in nature, and that's the good thing. Instead of becoming a more reactive player to many of the climate change challenges, the companies today are now forced to take in a much more long-term, strategic, and thoughtful actions. And some of these are, of course, starting with setting the ambition, setting the science-based target, which is aligning the company's growth path, the business plan with the 1.5 degrees Celsius or a 2 degrees Celsius emission pathway. And while doing so, they are also assessing the impact in terms of the products, in terms of their supply chain, in terms of their employee. So both in-house as well as the outside, the market impact of some of their strategies are being assessed very carefully. And all encompassing today, the technology is perhaps playing a big role. Technology is helping, say, a large companies having footprint across the world to consolidate their data, to assess their data, to monitor the data, and at the same time create the predictive insight or the cognitive insight that if certain actions are taken by the company, if certain investments are being made, what's going to be the futuristic impact on the market, on the product, and the various operations of the company. So as a whole, what I want to say that today the brighter things what we see that increasingly this whole journey towards decarbonization and net zero from the company side are becoming much more proactive, long-term, and strategic in nature, driven by or accompanied by the rapid advancement of advanced technologies. So just very quickly from the World Bank Group, what we are doing, the World Bank is aiming to invest and mobilize $200 billion in climate-related financing over 2021 and 2025, which is an ambitious goal, but the whole group is committed to work toward that. From the private sector, we have come to the conclusion almost that private sector is going to be the key engine for sustainable development going forward. So both in terms of the advisory support as well as to the financing support, the group has geared up to support private sector in a multiple different ways. Since 2005, IFC has actually provided $24+ billion long-term financing for climate-related projects. And the most important commitment is that by 2025, the majority of the portfolio of World Bank is going to be Paris aligned. So many of you perhaps seen the climate change action plan, which World Bank has launched in April 2021, where they're talking about at least 35% of World Bank Group's financing to have climate co-benefits over the next 5 years. And especially in the manufacturing, International Finance Corporation will support proven abatement measures as well as the innovative technologies which we are calling the deep tech. And there are growing examples around that. So this is my last slide. And what I mean to say, and I will come to the one statement which I probably have made in the beginning, that today the private sectors are just not dependent on the traditional bank financing or from the incentives of the government to become green or decarbonize their operations, because there are certain limitations from the both sides. There are limitations in terms of the capacity, in terms of the availability of the finance, and multiple different the bureaucratic complexities what the traditional banking system can really offer. But we also see there are growing examples of the varied capital market response, things like the green bond, things like the blue bond, which is a new thing, but which is in fact actually helping the oceans to become sustainable, the marine sustainability related things. These financial instruments are actually helping. And what the financial sector has realized that, okay, some of the climate opportunities, say the energy efficiency financing, resource efficiency, are perhaps sometimes too small for the banks to finance or even the companies to finance. Some of the climate opportunities, say the large scale renewable projects, say the carbon capture storage, are perhaps too heavy in terms of their investment, and which compete with the multiple different business priorities for every company. So there must be the need for certain instruments which are not too tied up with a particular green projects, but which are tied up with a broad sustainability commitment of the management, but which is also helping them to raise fund and use that flexibly across various green initiatives. And that's where both International Finance Corporation as well as some of the other impact investors are helping the companies through sustainability linked finance or sustainability linked bonds, which is gaining momentum. Today, if you see even in the Indian market, companies like Ultratech, the companies like JSW, they have issued those sustainability linked finances or bonds or access those kind of finance to fund their journey. And there are examples across the world. So this is just a glimpse of what IFC has done. So this is where I would end with a summary that while there are concerns, while there are issues around how private sector or companies can achieve the decarbonization targets, but definitely the situation today is a lot brighter, and there are lot many opportunities to look forward for, both in terms of the technology, in terms of the business models, as well as in terms of financing to support the organizations in their decarbonization journey. So thank you once again, ICC, for giving me this platform to talk about.
Thank you, Mr. Bandyopadhyay, for your very elaborated and informative presentations. There are certain silver lining also in our initiatives that we have achieved 40% renewable capacity additions in the country, which was targeted in 2030. We have already achieved 157 gigawatts of renewable energy, which is accounting 40% of the total 392 gigawatt capacity in the entire energy mix. So that is one part of the story, but we have a long way to go in decarbonization of energy, the circular economy, the transport mode, sustainable and electric mobility. Also, the company need to strategies with incorporation of new technologies, etc. A very good presentation. Thank you once again, Mr. Bandyopadhyay. Now, our next speaker would be Professor Arunabha Majumdar, Professor Emeritus, Jadavpur University, ex-Director Professor, All India Institute of Hygienic and Public Health. He will speak on application of green technology in waste management. Over to you, Professor Majumdar, please.
Thank you, sir. Is it visible, my slide?
Yes, yes, sir.
Yes, thank you, sir. Respected Chairman, sir, I will be just talking about some simple green technology for wastewater management. With the increasing demand for water scarcity, which is prevalent nowadays, we find that we have to meet the water crisis. The need to find strategies on how to sustain it is becoming more urgent. With the advancement of technology, experts are now looking into processing wastewater. The wastewater treatment is a process that removes undesirable compounds and contaminants that pollute the water. With the help of green technology, it will cater to polluted water from domestic and industrial areas to safely return it to the environment for the irrigation, industrial use, as well as for other type of uses. Green technology is the application of the environmental science and technology for the development and application of products, equipment, and systems to conserve the natural resources and environment, as well as to minimize or mitigate the negative impact on the environment from the human activities. So green technology may be also called as clean technology. The green technology, therefore, must be sustainable. Green technology means balancing the fulfillment of human needs with the protection of the natural environment and resources so that these needs can be met not only for the present, but also for the future. There are several fields where the green technology could be applied, like water conservation and treatment, wastewater treatment, recycle and reuse, solid waste management, air pollution control, energy conservation, agricultural growth, environmental remediation. We are now giving emphasis on the recycle and reuse of water because our country is facing water crisis problem. Vast of areas of our country is under water stress condition. Some of these stretches are at present in water acute situation. Therefore, there is no other alternative but to utilize our used water for recycling, reuse, so that the water crisis could be met. When we look into the wastewater treatment, these are some of the areas where we apply green technology. I am also working in these arenas for wastewater treatment, and I find that it requires very less energy for treatment of wastewater. Of course, the problem lies with respect to requirement of the area. So constraint is really the area, but otherwise, since we have enough sunshine, solar radiation, solar energy, so we can utilize that for the treatment of our wastewater, like waste stabilization pond practices, duckweed pond, constructed wetland, algal pond, sewage fed pond for pisciculture, and facultative aerated lagoon. There could be many other technologies available that also can be applied, which are termed as also green technology. This is the waste stabilization pond. It is basically a 3-pond system where we are treating wastewater. This can be from domestic arena as well as from the industrial arena. These are basically the shallow man-made basins where the water flows from one pond to another, and we are achieving the objective of the treatment system, the conventional treatment system, by applying mechanical equipment, lots of energy. But this is requiring, of course, several hours, means it may be 6-7 days time. Also, that way we require a little area. There are 3 ponds that way we are treating our wastewater: anaerobic pond, facultative pond, maturation pond. In India, we have installed very many such type of waste stabilization pond practices. Even in West Bengal, for municipal wastewater treatment, there are several waste stabilization ponds are functioning. First we remove the inorganic materials, then we are providing anaerobic pond and then facultative pond. Issue is this, that in the second pond, the solar energy is getting utilized, and we are oxidizing the organic matter by the available bacteria. So a symbiotic relationship is maintained. Another very important of this pond system is the maturation pond, where die-off of bacteria takes place. You know that we have enough sewage treatment plants, but it is very difficult to remove the coliform organism or the pathogenic organism that way. When we look into our river system, we find the concentration of fecal coliform could be as high as 100,000 to 300,000 per 100 ml. Even in river Ganga, this concentration is prevailing. So therefore, if we can remove the pathogenic organism, if we allow the die-off of the pathogenic organism, we do feel that the treatment would be basically working in the right direction. Sorry. The advantages of this waste stabilization pond is simplicity, low cost, high efficiency, mechanical aerators are not required, clarifiers not required, sludge pumpings not required. It represents sustainable natural effluent treatment system, utilize solar energy and do not require electricity, and do not use any electromechanical instrument. But efficiency-wise, it can be compared with any conventional or advanced wastewater treatment system even. The first pond is a little deeper, 2.5 to 5 meter, and then comes the second pond, that is facultative pond. It is between 1 to 1.5 meter. In this facultative pond, you see the symbiotic relationships is maintained. We are getting enough oxygen. The oxygen level in the afternoon becomes 18 to 20 milligram per liter. It is a supersaturation condition. Oxygen level may be at 10 degrees centigrade, 9.2 milligram per liter, 20 degrees centigrade, maybe 8 milligram per liter. But in the daytime, rather in the afternoon, the oxygen concentration rises even up to 18 to 20 milligram per liter. It remains aerobic condition throughout the day and night. In the night time, the oxygen is utilized by the bacteria. So unique natural treatment system is taking place here. And in the maturation pond, I mentioned the bacterial die-off takes place. So this is the simple waste stabilization pond. Next, we come to another pond, that is another type of treatment, that is duckweed pond. Basically, this is Lemna minor. This is the small plant that is getting utilized, and this is actually working as a principle to remove the organic matter. The organic pollutants get removed in this pond, the duckweed is growing, and duckweed can be utilized as a fish feed. So this is also advantage that we can utilize the duckweed in the pisciculture unit. Then we are coming to another technology, that is facultative aerated lagoon. Of course, it requires a little energy in the sense that we have to have aerators, or we have to give certain agitation in the system, but it is not like conventional treatment system. It is not that the suspended solids all are in suspension. So in the facultative aerated lagoon, we have advantage that we can reduce the detention time, and it can be applied even by the industrial unit. I'm showing here that one paper industry where this technology has been utilized. This paper industry is utilizing old papers, manufacturing duplex paper, duplex board rather. This has, of course, certain conventional treatment system that like it is have a physicochemical treatment. This is the clariflocculator. And then it is coming to the extended aeration treatment system where we have diffuse aeration system. Then it is coming to the secondary clarifier. But then we have to give some tertiary treatment system, because reuse of wastewater is very important for the paper industry. So to achieve 80 to 85% recycling, wastewater for recycling, we have to provide a tertiary treatment system. So this is number 7 is the facultative aerated lagoon, where it's a pond type of lagoon, and the solar energy is utilized, as well as we are also supplying some amount of air through surface aerator. So this is giving a simple solution with respect to recycling and reuse in the paper industry. This is another simple technology which is known as soil biotechnology. Soil biotechnology, here basically the wastewater is getting distributed over a media. This media is nothing but soil, specifically prepared soil. Then we have sand, coarse sand, and then we have gravel, certain layers. And when this is passing through this, the contaminants are getting removed, both bacteriological contaminants as well as organic contaminants. We have a collection tank here. This is they can taken out for reuse, and again we have certain provision of recycling if necessary for returning back to the system. The salient feature of this particular thing is that no sludge is generated, no mechanical aeration. This is basically natural treatment, no odor problem. And little energy is required, of course, for pumping. Land area requirement is 1500 to 2500 square meter per MLD. And O&M cost roughly 1 lakh per year. Of course, presently it is slightly increased. This is another technology we are working with, and in many places in India, this has already been installed and going to be installed in more, that is constructed wetland for grey water treatment. This is after the sedimentation, the water is taken into the system. This is taken into the system from the cities and town, small cities basically, where we have on-site sanitation system, because we have no underground sewerage system in most of the cities and town. So basically the water is termed as grey water. The grey water is therefore provided on this particular bed. It has a media like sand and gravel. It is passing vertically down. It can be also horizontal. So horizontal constructed wetlands we are also constructing. We are providing special type of plants. So it is a phytoremediation as well as bioremediation. So phytoremediation, bioremediation is taking place without having any energy for supplying oxygen, no surface aerator, no diffuse aerator, nothing else. And finally, we are getting this water and it is getting utilized for very many purposes. Finally, I come to the example of East Kolkata wetland. You know that Kolkata city, basically we have no sewage treatment plant. around 910 million liter of wastewater is going through the East Kolkata wetland. The East Kolkata wetland is having 12,740 acres of hectares of land, out of which 3,900 hectares is fisheries wetland, basically. This is the dry weather flow channel. The Calcutta sewage is going through this channel from Topshia Point. Ultimately, it is reaching to Kulti River at Ghushigata. The distance is 32 kilometers. While this wastewater is flowing through the DWF channel, major portion of this wastewater is utilized in the pisciculture. We have 260 pisciculture units producing 20,000 metric ton of fish. And the treatment system is going on like our waste stabilization pond, as I mentioned. Basically, the ponds are working like a facultative pond. Symbiotic relationship is maintained between bacteria and algae. Fish is growing there. Certain phytoplanktons are also growing. That is being utilized by the fish. And this is a ecologically balanced wastewater treatment system that is prevailing. Roughly 420 crores of rupees subsidy we are getting from the East Kolkata wetland. Calcutta is getting that because the East Calcutta wetland is providing the ecologically balanced wastewater treatment system. This is the pisciculture that is going on, and everyday fish is coming to the Calcutta market. Sorry. Now, East Kolkata wetland, therefore, performing important functions like mitigate flood, underground aquifer recharging, providing irrigable water, ecologically balanced sewage treatment, thereby improving water quality of sewage, utilization of solar energy, liberates oxygen in the atmosphere, maintain biodiversity, produces fish, and support livelihood to many. Finally, I like to mention that to achieve sustainable environmental management, green technology needs to be applied as much as feasible. Priority must be given for conservation of natural resources vis-a-vis development of green technology. Many indigenous traditional technology may be upgraded as green technology for societal benefit. Ecologically balanced approach may be adopted to develop green technology, and green technology should aim at living the right way. Thank you very much. Namaskar.
Thank you, Professor Majumdar, for your very informative and very prudent subject in today's industries. I think viewers will be largely benefited that wastewater utilization is one of the key areas for our focus, and the energy efficient waste stabilization ponds, whatever topic you have covered, it is very, very applicable for the entire industries. And for the paucity of time, we are not encouraging any QA session here. But if any of the viewers ask any questions, they can refer it to ICC, which can be forwarded to the speakers, and we will get the answers. So we have almost come to the end of the technical session. Our last speaker will be Dr. K.M. Agarwal. He is professor and former dean of IISWBM and a very noted environmentalist. So I would request Dr. K.M. Agarwal to kindly speak on driving green economy for sustainable development in the new normal, which is very apt subject you have chosen. Thank you, sir. Over to you, Professor Agarwal. Sir, you are muted. Yes, sir.
Hello. Hello.
Yes, yes, Professor, you can continue. We can now
Yeah.
hear you.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry for this. Just is my screen is visible? Visible?
No, the screen is not visible, but we can hear you.
Okay. Let me just see that if I can.
Yes, now it is visible.
Is now screen is visible, huh? Yeah.
Now screen is visible.
Yeah. So thank you, Mr. Mukherjee. At the outset, I would like to thank entire ICC team, especially to Professor Alok Mukherjee, under whom guidance we have worked for the Environmental Excellence Award. And we are associated with ICC for the quite long time. And every time we share a lot of experience and gain a lot of experience while evaluating or interacting with the various industry, including the today's session chairman, Mr. Mukherjee. So once again, thanks to everyone. As we are towards the end of the today's this partnership summit, which is the one of the coveted program of ICC, that we were talking about the can say the green economy, then the making the transition towards the green economy, for the achieving the sustainable development goal, and also for the very can say strong resilience. So I would like to just give the little more deep insight that how we can consider in the post-COVID scenario that which has again consider disrupted our supply chain, and also pose the challenge when we are talking about the decarbonization, when we are talking about the achieving the net zero. We have the manifold challenges, and what we felt that our GDP is also predicted to slightly come down in the this current year. So what we are suggesting that if, and what we are suggesting that the important tool which we can use is the green economy, as our earlier speaker Professor Majumdar was talking about the using the green technology for the wastewater treatment. Earlier also we have talked about the number of, you can say, the sectors which are leading to the various environmental crises, and which need to be prioritized in terms of the reducing our ecological footprint. So when we talk about the green economy, it's the economy which not only result in the reducing the environmental risk and scarcity, but it also aim for the sustainable development without degrading the environment. So that is the can say the tool which we are can say the advocating for the industry to use, which will have the win-win model, which will when we talk about say the circular economy, that this particular model will not only can say the helping us to recycle and reutilize the waste, but also it will be minimizing the pressure on the natural resources, and it will be also leading to the reduction of the reduction of the cost of the production. And as already we are fully aware, Mr. Bandyopadhyay has already given that by 2030, the Sustainable Development Agenda with 17 Sustainable Development Goal and 169 target that were adopted in the 2015 demonstrated the scale and the ambition of the member state, including our own country. And we have considered achieved significantly in the number of fronts. As we were talking that the as the our human development index is increasing, the ecological footprint is also increasing. So our attempt is that how to minimize the ecological footprint and achieve the developmental goal, and that we are can say the trying to achieve by promoting the green economy, which will be not only can say the reducing the environmental impact and but also it will be consider leading towards the inclusive growth of the country. And as we have the number of, you can say, the opportunities, not only in terms of the reducing the poverties and inequalities, but also the ecosystem services. You must have just noticed that Professor Majumdar has rightly mentioned around 400 crore annually subsidy we are getting due to only one single use, that the entire Kolkata city sewage water is not mechanically treated, but it is naturally treated by adopting the technology which he has discussed. We can say the facultative pond or the waste stabilization pond. So the kind of, we can say the, similarly, we are not consider now, because of the prevailing pandemic, we have realized the importance of the you can say the oxygen. And if we are not maintaining the oxygen level in the our atmosphere, that is again going to create a lot of, you can say, the risk. So we have to maintain the oxygen balance also. So likewise, we are getting the, you can say, the 47 to 90% of the so-called GDP GDP because of the various ecosystem services. We can that as per the Carl Brunkert had defined this green economy based on the six main sector which we were talking from the morning itself. That one is the one of the major sector which we can you can say the explore for the implementing the green economy, that is the renewable energy sector. And as we all are aware that we have set very ambitious goal, and we are achieving that also, that how we can have the energy mix with the maximum contribution of the renewable energy. Similarly, we have the another potential area that is the green buildings, which had the you can say the which can lead us to substantially save the resources. And then we have already talked about the sustainable transport, then the water management and the waste management that we were talking, and also the land management. So these are the six, you can say, the main sector where we are thinking that if we operationalize the green economy, we will be aiming to achieve the goal of sustainable development, and also the this your agenda which we have fixed up for the 2030. We will be close to that. Then when we are talking about the can say the implementing the or operationalizing the circular economy, as we know, we all are aware that the linear economy model which traditionally follow the take, make and dispose system, that lead to the, you can say, the excessive amount of the waste generation, and that create the lot of, you can say, the pressure on the natural resources. So what we are talking the linear economy business model that we are can say the which is can say the generating the waste, and this waste we are that waste is causing the various, you can say, the environmental risk. We are trying to convert this into the closed loop system. That is the we are trying to discover the, can say, the new sustainable means by optimizing the existing process for designing and developing the new product. And they are doing this part by the incorporating the make, use and recycle economic model, which we are, you can say, the referring in terms of the circular economy. So to achieve the goal of sustainable development, the shift in the industrial process from the open loop system, in which, as we discussed, the resources moves through the system to become waste, to a closed loop system where the waste become input for the new process is can say that is strongly needed. And the priority basis not only to optimize the use of natural resources as we were discussing, but also to proceed towards the cleaner and the greener economy. So according the circular economy focuses on the eliminating the waste and the unnecessary use of the resources, and the goal is to use a few resources as possible by keeping material in circulation and getting the greatest value from them. And this enables individual or the group of industry to manage their industrial production on sustainable basis by minimizing the raw material energy consumption, reducing the waste generation and subsequent recycling and reuse, and ensuring the cost effective environmental management and the economic viability, economically viability of the system. And this circular economy is designed to benefit business, society, and the environment for the industry and the other waste. However, the circular economy offer a unique opportunity to help prevent the depletion of the vital and renewable natural resources. And perhaps the greatest impact of the circular economy model is how it worked to reduce the strain on the natural resources. This gives the typical model of the circular economy, that is the starting from the production, which required the input in the form of the energy and the other material input, then distribution, then the use, disposal, and in between we have the waste and the emission. So that we are trying to reuse, remanufacturing, refurbishing, and recycling, and that will be considered leading us to save the our natural resources, reducing the ecological footprint, and the prime strategies which we can adopt for implementing the circular economy, maybe at consider not consider as a whole, but maybe in the production and the purchasing, maybe at the consumption and use, and then the collection and the processing. When we talk about the production and use, then we have to think for, as Professor Majumdar was also mentioning, that the designing the better product using the cleaner technology, which will be leading to the reducing the process waste. Then we move to the, you can say, the optimize the life cycle through the alternate consumption, that how we can optimize the life cycle of it. Then we have the improved collection. Then when we talk about the collection and processing, to the extent possible, we have to encourage the recycling, reuse, and then also we have to create the infrastructure so that the recycling, reuse of the waste become the, you can say, the more, you can say, the effective and more, you can say, the then the driving economy in the new normal is our road to the sustainable development in new normal should mandate the application of, as we were discussing, sustainable business practice in all the organizations. We can use the combination of strategies as we discuss and develop the informed business model that is measurable, and successfully integrating these practices will address the economic, environment, social concern of any business and extrapolate it to the calculate a country's GDP. As we can see that the seventh environmental action program has considered a vision that in 2050 we live well within the planet's ecological limit. Our prosperity and the health environment stem from an innovative circular economy where nothing is wasted and where natural resources are managed substantially and biodiversity is protected, valued, and restored in a way that enhance our society's resilience. Our low carbon growth has long been decoupled from the resource use, setting the pace for global, safe, and sustainable society. So this vision we have to try to implement, and likewise the similar vision has been considered set by the various developed and developing countries, and accordingly the governance and the policy framing would play a critical role in the transition of world economies toward the circulating, especially since the concept of the circular economy is not all preservative within the administrative circle and citizen knowledge. So accordingly, the India's 8-point intended nationally determined contribution are to put forward and further propagate a healthy and sustainable way of living based on transition and valued of conservation and motivation, to adopt a climate friendly and the cleaner path than the one followed hitherto by the previous administrations. And accordingly, the India's 8-point intended nationally determined contribution are to put forward and further propagate a healthy and sustainable way of living based. These are, you can say, some of the major points which have been intended to be implemented, and to achieve about 40% cumulative electric power installed capacity from non-fossil fuel-based energy resources by 2030, with the help of transfer of technology and the low-cost international finance, including the Green Climate Fund. and to create additional carbon sink of 2.5 to 3 billion tons of the CO2 equivalent through additional forest and tree cover by 2030. And we are targeting that at our consider at least 1/3 of the geographical area should be under forest cover. And for that, accordingly, we are giving a lot of emphasis on deforestation and reforestation. And to better adopt the climate change by enhancing investment in the development program in the sector vulnerable to the climate change, as we were discussing. Professor Bandyopadhyay has already highlighted the 8 sectors, particularly agriculture, water resource, Himalayan region, coastal region, health and disaster management. And to mobilize domestic and new and the additional fund from the developed country to implement the above mitigation and adaptation action in the view of the resource required resources required and the resource gap. And finally, to build the capacities, create domestic framework and international architecture for quick diffusion of the cutting edge climate technology in the India for joint collaborative research and development for such technology. And accordingly, if we review the progress on the aspect related to the environment and energy, as we were our chairman of the pollution control board was mentioning that we have the well-placed policy, but we need to long way to go because already out of the 126 non-attainment city as per the NGT, the 7 are in the West Bengal. So we need to consider make a lot of progress in achieving the better air quality index. As we all know that the air quality index is very, very alarming, which usually you can say that especially in the winter season rise by 3 to 5 fold what we consider that is the good. Similarly, in the waste management, we need to make a lot of the progress. We need a lot of data to use this effectively for achieving the set objective of the waste management, whether we are talking about the recycling, reusing, and operating the circular economy. Although we have the well-established policies, we have the rules, regulation, but still we have to go a long way. Similarly, in front of the water, we need to, as we know that more and more can say the areas are coming under the water scare area. And as our this honorable chairman, session chairman was also mentioning, the water becomes very, very critical for the industry. You all are fully aware that the water has become the very, very, you can say the precious resource, and the lot of cost need to be incurred for procuring this particular resource, which is the one of the basic, you can say the raw material for the most of the industry. And similarly, in the forest, we need to we made a lot of improvement, but still we have to go a long way. Similarly, in the biodiversity, climate change, and in the energy access, all these areas we need to make the lot of, you can say the improvement. Although in the most of the area we have the well-established policy, and only the in the certain area we have the good, you can say the database also, but a lot of, you can say the innovations are required. And so we can hope for the green future, that by integrating the circular economy practices with the green economy practices and implementing it to the industry and business model, we can definitely hope for the green future in the post COVID arena or in the new normal. And the adoption of these circular economy strategies will not only reduce the generation of waste, but it will also help, also enhance the resource efficiency. And the awareness among the small and medium scale industry especially will, with the giant gain in the regarding the recycling and reuse potential of the waste, will help us to adopt circular economy strategy. And the recent trend shows that the quantity of the disposal of the waste, when we were doing the study as a part of the pollution control board, this project, what we found that in the last 3 years, if we talk about say the West Bengal, the quantum of the waste which we were sending to the hazardous waste site was say around 50,000 tons, which has drastically reduced to the in the last 3 years, drastically reduced to the 30,000 tons because of the, you can say the exploring the are innovating the, can say, the ideas for the recycling and reusing the waste. One such example we can here make a note that the waste which was you can say the sludge which we were generating from the, say, the petrochemical industry, which was finding the way in the landfill site. But that, since it has got the good calorific value, that has been explored that this can be used for the co-processing in the cement industry, and that has resulted the drastic reduction. So likewise, we are looking for the more and more innovation to achieve the goal of the sustainable development. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Agarwal. Again, a very informative session. And what are the focus areas for the industries going in for renewable energy, the green buildings, the sustainable transport system, then water, waste, and land management. These are the focus areas on your speech, and how to implement the circular economy in the processes for getting maximum benefit. So friends, we have just overshot the timing, and we have a very informative, educative, and whatnot, a good tool for implementation for our industries. We have learned from the technical sessions, and I'm pretty sure that most of the viewers have a lot of inputs for their own plants or own areas to implement. And see, the fact is that we know the policies are in place. There are written down policies, and we also get to know that a lot of investment opportunities also in the technology and in the environmental aspects of it. We are hopeful that many of the global giants are going and taking pledge to safeguard our planet. And so it is a very encouraging scenario. And in the country also, we are going ahead with the targets we have committed in Paris as well as in the COP26 commitments. Very tough, although, but we have, as we know that we have achieved the renewable energy target at least 8 years in advance. So we should be hopeful that with the kind of initiatives the government is taking, and also the participation from different stalwarts in this kind of sessions and seminars to percolate the knowledge down below to the grassroots level, we hope to achieve the targets within a shortest possible time. But as a good corporate and good citizen, we have some behavioral change. We should focus more on the environmental sustainability as well as good governance, ESG, which is the budging point at this moment. We in the 3 Ps, we probably would like to keep planet ahead of people and profit. So if we can safeguard our planet, our people will be saved. What we have seen in the ravages for the last 1.5 years, we see that if planet cannot be kept in its true life, then people cannot survive. So biodiversity is another area we should protect in all the industries, in all our areas. And from the industry point of view, we should always think for reducing the natural resources by improving efficiency, recycling, reusing, 3 Rs, as we know that we should incorporate in all the processes. And last but not the least is the technology adoption. In today's world, we have a lot of technological innovations coming in the way, and that not only will save the timing or save the process and the cost, but also is useful for the long-term sustainability of the system. So one end, we should be sustainable. We should be having resilience to take care of the sudden shocks which may come in the way for sustainability and long life of the business. So business will have to continue. The planet has also to be protected. The environment need to be protected. The ecological sustainability is to be achieved. So we hope with a fervent hope that we can strike a balance. On one end, we can develop our economy. At the same time, we can reduce the impact of environmental impacts in the planet. So with this, I thank all the speakers who have taken their time out of their busy schedule to just give us some impression about their studies, their thoughts in environment management. Now I leave it to Mrs. Mukherjee to continue it further.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. We understand the difficult situation that you have also been in. You are still going through a COVID crisis, but thank you so much. Can't thank you enough. I would request, okay, all our speakers have now switched on their camera. So Shujo, if you can take a group photo, please.
Yes,
sir,
sure, done.
Thank you. Thank you. So we now come to the end of this wonderful session, very informative, as Mr. Mukherjee has also shared in detail about this, what all has been covered. So, and I would like to thank all the speakers, our chairman, Mr. Alok Mukherjee, Dr. Agarwal, Professor Mujumdar, Mr. Mukherjee, Mr. Ajay Bandopadhyay had another meeting, so he has left. So thank you everyone for making this such a grand success. To all the participants, all the attendees, and a special round of congratulations to all the winners of the Environment Excellence Awards this year. So we have come to the end of this program, and we will look forward to having you back with us next year with renewed vigor, and stay safe, everybody. Have a very nice day. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you, Shoma.
Bye.
Thank you,
Thank you, sir.
ICC.